In a cold, gray prison yard, a group of men set their sights on their newest target. A quiet, unassuming black inmate whose steady gaze and solitary demeanor marked him as prey to them. He seemed like just another victim, a man stripped of his freedom and his dignity, too broken by the system to fight back. But appearances can be deceiving. The man they planned to break was no ordinary inmate. Once the most feared Delta Force commander in the military, he had led covert missions into enemy territory that others would not dare attempt. His hands carried the weight of countless kills, each one a calculated decision made in the name of duty. Framed for a crime he did not commit, he was now a pawn in a larger game, and the gang had been hired to ensure he did not survive long enough to uncover the truth. Their first mistake was assuming he was an easy target. Their second was forcing him to respond. As the gang escalated their threats, the fragile balance of the prison began to shift, setting the stage for a confrontation that would ripple far beyond its walls. This was not just a fight for survival. It was a reckoning that would expose the corruption running through the veins of the system and remind everyone that even in the darkest places, there are men who refuse to be broken. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe. The clang of the cell door reverberated through the block, a sharp reminder of the harsh reality Darius' shadow Holt now faced. Inside the dimly lit space, he stood motionless, his imposing frame nearly filling the small room. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned his surroundings, the walls stained with years of neglect, the lingering scent of sweat and despair in the air. It was a far cry from the precision and discipline of his Delta Force days. He took a deep breath, his mind pulling him back to the missions that had defined his career. In the deserts of Afghanistan, they had called him the Shadow, a man who moved unseen, struck with precision, and left no trace. His comrades had trusted him with their lives. Now here he was, betrayed by the country he had sworn to protect, framed for a crime he did not commit. Darius sat on the edge of the metal cot, the thin mattress creaking beneath his weight. His fingers grazed the cold steel of the bedframe as he thought of his family, his mother's proud smile when he returned home in uniform, the folded flag from his father's military funeral still tucked away in a box he had never had the heart to open. Those memories were his anchor, but the weight of the current moment pressed heavily on him. Through the small, reinforced window on the cell door, he could see the other inmates moving through the block. Tattoos marked alliances, body language revealed intent. The lines between predator and prey were clearly drawn, and Darius knew where he stood. A target. Whispers had already reached him. The Iron Fangs, the self-proclaimed rulers of the yard, had taken an interest. He did not know why yet, but he knew it was not good. Their stares during meal breaks, the subtle gestures in his direction, all spoke of violence simmering just beneath the surface. Darius clenched his fists, his knuckles white. "I have faced worse," he muttered to himself, the words barely audible. But even as he reassured himself, the question gnawed at him. How long could he last here before his enemies struck? The door's observation panel slid open, and a guard's indifferent face appeared. "Visitor!" Darius rose, his mind already shifting gears. It had to be Elena Voss. Maybe she had answers. Maybe she had hope. Or maybe this visit would only deepen the mystery surrounding the betrayal that had brought him here. Darius sat in the visitation room, his broad shoulders slightly hunched as he stared at the glass separating him from Elena Voss. She was a lifeline, the one person on the outside fighting to clear his name. But as her sharp eyes studied him, he knew she could see the cracks. He was not the unshakable Delta Force commander she might have imagined. Not here, not now. Elena leaned forward, her voice low but urgent. "Darius, I have been pulling every string I can find. The case against you is full of holes, but it is going to take time to expose them. Until then, you have to stay safe." Darius's jaw tightened, his hand resting against the cool steel table. "Safe? You do not know what it is like in here, Elena. Every corner I turn, every breath I take, I feel it. This is not like a battlefield where you know who the enemy is. Here they are everywhere." Elena frowned, her pen frozen over the notepad in her lap. "The Iron Fangs. They are watching me," Darius admitted, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Sizing me up. It is only a matter of time before they make their move." His gaze faltered for a moment, his composure slipping. "I have seen what they do to men in here, Elena, and I do not know if I am ready for it." Her expression softened, the usual sharp edge of her determination giving way to genuine concern. Darius, you have faced worse than these thugs. You have led missions that no one else would even dream of taking. You are one of the strongest men I have ever met. Out there, I had a team. I had control." His voice wavered slightly, and he has clenched his fists. "In here, I am alone. I have seen men break in this place. Strong men. I cannot let that happen to me." Elena's hand hovered over the glass, an unspoken gesture of support. "You will not break. I know you will not. But you have to promise me something. If they come for you, you fight. Do not give them the satisfaction of seeing you afraid." Darius's eyes met hers, the fear giving way to a flicker of resolve. "I am trying, Elena. But this place, it is a different kind of war. There is no honor here, no rules." Elena nodded slowly. "I know it is not fair. I know this is not where you are supposed to be, but you have to hold on. The truth is out there, and I will find it. You did not sabotage that pipeline, Darius, and we are going to prove it." He exhaled sharply, the weight of her words both comforting and suffocating. They had framed him for a reason. Someone powerful wanted him out of the picture, and they were not going to stop. The Iron Fangs were just the start. Elena leaned back, her gaze steely. "I am already digging into the evidence they used against you. It does not add up. I have found discrepancies in the witness statements, missing files, and the warden." She paused, her voice dropping. "He is not clean. There is money moving through his accounts that should not be there." Darius raised an eyebrow. "You think the warden is involved?" "I am not sure yet, but someone in this prison is keeping an eye on you. And not just the gang," Elena replied. "If I can find the connection, I can blow this wide open, but you need to give me time." The door behind Darius creaked open, and the guard stepped inside. "Time's up," the guard said gruffly. Elena's voice softened. "Darius, listen to me. You are not alone in this. I am with you every step of the way. Stay strong. Fight back if you have to, but do not lose yourself in here." He stood slowly, towering over the table as he prepared to leave. Before turning, he met her gaze one last time. "Just promise me you will find out who did this. I need to know why they chose me, why they wanted me gone." Elena gave him a firm nod. "I will. I will not stop until I get answers. And Darius, you have more strength than anyone in this place. Do not let them forget that." As Darius walked back toward his cell, her words echoed in his mind. Strength, fight, survive. But even as he tried to hold on to those ideas, the truth gnawed at him. This place was wearing him down piece by piece, and the Iron Fangs were circling, waiting for the moment he would slip. The mess hall was alive with the chaotic noise of clattering trays, muffled conversations, and occasional bursts of laughter that did not reach Darius. He sat alone at one of the worn metal tables, his back instinctively to the wall, his sharp eyes scanning the room. It was not paranoia, it was survival. The Iron Fangs were there, scattered across several tables, their presence dominating the room like a pack of wolves staking their claim. Their tattoos, a mix of snarling beast and crude symbols, marked them as predators. Darius knew better than to underestimate them. Their leader, Vance Maddox, sat at the center, leaning back in his chair, a smug grin plastered across his face as he scanned the room. Darius focused on the tray in front of him, overcooked pasta, something resembling bread, and watery beans. He ate slowly, forcing each bite down as his instincts screamed at him to stay alert. Every movement, every sound was cataloged in his mind. "Hey, Holt!" The sharp voice cut through the din and the room seemed to quiet slightly. Darius did not look up immediately. He knew better than to give them the satisfaction. But when the voice came again, closer this time, he raised his head. Vance was standing a few feet away, his gang flanking him like hyenas circling prey. "What is the matter, soldier boy? Food not up to your standards." Vance sneered, loud enough for others to hear. Darius met his gaze, his expression calm but unyielding. "Just trying to get through my meal in peace." Vance laughed, a sound that was more threatening than humorous. "Peace? You think there is peace in here?" He leaned forward, resting his hands on the table as his gang closed in behind him. "You are in the jungle now, Holt, and in the jungle the weak get eaten alive." Darius did not flinch, but his hand subtly tightened on the edge of the tray. "If that is supposed to scare me, you are going to have to try harder." The room seemed to hold its breath, the tension thick enough to choke on. Vance's smirk faltered for a split second before returning, sharper this time. He straightened, motioning to one of his men, a wiry guy with a crooked nose, who stepped forward. "You hear that, boys? Holt thinks he is tough. Let us see how tough he is." Crooked Nose reached out, snatching the bread off Darius's tray and taking a dramatic bite. "Ain't bad, huh?" The gang laughed, the sound echoing through the hall like a taunt. Darius's jaw tightened, but he did not move. He kept his gaze locked on Vance. Vance tilted his head, his voice dropping to something more venomous. "You know what I see when I look at you, a man who does not belong here, a man who thinks he is better than the rest of us." He spat the words out, his tone dripping with disdain. "But you are not better, Holt. You are just another piece of trash they tossed in here to rot." The words hit harder than Darius expected, stirring the lingering doubts and fears he had been trying to suppress. For a moment, he felt the room closing in, the eyes of everyone watching, waiting for him to break. "You have got it wrong," Darius said finally, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "I am not here to rot, and I am not afraid of you." Vance's smirk widened, but there was something darker in his eyes now, something dangerous. "Oh, you will be. Give it time." The gang laughed again, their voices grating like nails on a chalkboard. Vance took a step back, his gaze never leaving Darius. "Enjoy your meal, soldier boy, while you can." They moved away, their laughter and jeers lingering in the air. Darius exhaled slowly, his grip on the tray loosening. He could feel the eyes of the other inmates on him, some curious, others pitying, a few amused, but he did not care about their opinions. He cared about survival. He forced himself to finish his meal, each bite a deliberate act of defiance. He would not let them see fear, even if he felt it creeping up his spine. As he left the mess hall, he could feel their eyes following him, their laughter echoing in his ears. Vance's words repeated in his mind, each one like a poison he could not shake. Give it time. Darius knew time was not on his side. The Iron Fangs were not just testing him anymore. They were making their move, and in this jungle, he would have to rely on every ounce of his training to survive. The fluorescent lights in the prison hallways flickered as Darius made his way back to his cell, the mess hall's lingering tension still heavy in the air. He walked with purpose, keeping his head forward and his stride steady, but his senses were tuned to every sound behind him. Footsteps echoed faintly, barely audible above the din of the prison. He knew they were coming. As he reached the cell block, the air seemed heavier, colder. The usual noise of inmates shouting or laughing from their cells was muted, replaced by a quiet anticipation. Darius's eyes swept the area, cataloging faces peering through bars, eyes watching him with a mix of curiosity and unease. They knew something he did not. The ambush came fast. A sharp sound, a muffled thud of boots on the concrete floor, was his only warning before a wiry figure lunged at him from the shadows. Darius pivoted instinctively, deflecting the attack with a forearm. The impact jarred his arm, but his training took over, every movement precise and efficient. The first assailant, a lanky man with tattoos snaking up his neck, staggered back, but two more rushed in. One went low, aiming to tackle Darius, while the other swung a sharpened toothbrush aimed at his side. Darius twisted. The makeshift weapon grazed his ribs but failed to connect. With a brutal elbow, he knocked the second man off balance, sending him crashing into the wall. The third assailant managed to grab him from behind, locking thick arms around his chest, but Darius shifted his weight, slamming the man backward into the nearest cell bars. The clang echoed through the block, a sharp metallic scream that drew more attention from the onlookers. "Come on, soldier boy," a voice snarled. Vance stepped into view, his smirk replaced with a cruel grin. "Let us see if all that military training can save you now." The gang swarmed him. Darius's fists flew, every strike calculated, every movement designed to conserve energy. A solid punch to one attacker's jaw sent him sprawling, but another came at him with a shiv, slicing dangerously close to Darius's arm. The blade nicked him, drawing a thin line of blood. Darius did not flinch. Pain was nothing new. "You think you are untouchable?" Vance taunted, standing back while his men did the dirty work. "You are nothing in here, just another dog waiting to be put down." Darius did not answer. Words would not matter to men like this. Instead, he grabbed a chair left outside one of the cells and swung it with force, scattering the men like bowling pins. The sound of the impact reverberated, silencing the block for a moment. It seemed over. The attackers lay groaning on the floor, their bravado shattered, but Vance stepped forward, slow and deliberate, cracking his knuckles. "You think that is it?" Vance sneered. "This is not over, Holt. Not by a long shot." Before Darius could respond, the sharp whistle of a guard's baton cut through the air. "Break it up!" A guard stormed into the scene, his baton raised as he glared at the group. Darius did not miss the brief glance the guard exchanged with Vance, a flicker of something unspoken. "You!" the guard barked at Darius, pointing the baton at him. "Back to your cell now!" Darius wiped the blood from his arm with the back of his hand, his breathing heavy but controlled. He did not argue. Turning his back on Vance, he started toward his cell, but he could feel the gang leader's eyes boring into him, his smirk a promise of more to come. As he reached the threshold of his cell, Vance's voice echoed behind him. "We are just getting started, soldier boy. Sleep with one eye open." Darius stepped inside. The cold steel door slammed shut behind him. His hands braced against the wall, the adrenaline beginning to ebb. He glanced at the thin cut on his arm, then at the pale reflection of himself in the small mirror above the sink. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar: vulnerability. This was not the battlefield he was trained for. Out there, he had his team, his weapons, a mission. In here, he had nothing but his instincts and the ghosts of what he used to be. And men like Vance were not going to stop until he was broken or dead. Darius took a deep breath, pushing the fear aside. He could not afford to let it consume him. Not here, not now. In the distance, he could still hear Vance's laughter, faint but haunting. The fight was over, but the war had just begun. The dim glow of the corridor lights seeped through the narrow slot in Darius's cell door, casting faint, distorted shadows on the cold, cracked walls. He lay on the thin mattress, his body still tense from the earlier fight. The cut on his arm throbbed faintly, but the pain was not what kept him awake. It was the voices. The Iron Fangs were loud tonight, their taunts carrying through the silence like a cruel lullaby. "Better keep one eye open, soldier boy," one sneered from down the hall. The voice was sharp, grating, designed to crawl under his skin. Another voice chimed in, dripping with malice. "Does not matter how tough you are, Holt. You bleed just like the rest of us." Laughter echoed, bouncing off the walls in waves. They were relentless, testing him even now when the bars separated them. Darius turned onto his side, staring at the wall, his muscles coiled tight. Their words were not just noise, they were a promise. He had seen men in here crumble under less. Every taunt was a reminder that he was not invincible. His mind drifted back to the attack, the speed of it, the raw violence, the way Vance had hung back, letting his men take the first swing while he watched like a predator toying with its prey. They had not even been trying to kill him. Not yet. It was a test, a warning. The real storm was still coming. Darius's breath came slow and steady, but his chest felt heavy. This was not the battlefield he knew. There were no clear objectives, no comrades to cover his six. In the military, he had been the shadow, a name whispered with respect, even fear. But here he was, just another target. Another voice pierced the quiet. "How does it feel, war hero, being locked up with the scum you thought you were better than?" Darius's jaw tightened. The words stung more than he cared to admit. He closed his eyes, forcing his breathing to steady. But even in the silence of his mind, the voices followed. His own thoughts betrayed him. Whispering fears he tried to bury. What if Elena could not clear his name? What if he did not survive long enough to get out? What if the Iron Fangs made good on their threats? No, he could not think like that. He would not. Darius sat up abruptly, the mattress creaking beneath him. His hands ran over his face, rough with stubble, before dropping to his lap. His heart beat heavily in his chest, but his mind clung to a single thread. He had to stay strong. Getting out of this prison was not just about survival. It was about justice. The people who framed him thought they could bury him here, silence him forever. They did not realize they had put him in a place where his instincts, his training, would keep him alive. Leaning back against the wall, Darius let his eyes roam over the small, cramped cell. He studied every detail, the scuffs on the floor, the peeling paint, the faint graffiti carved into the metal bed frame. This was his battleground now. His gaze landed on the narrow window high above the cell, its dirty glass offering only a sliver of the night sky. The faintest glimmer of stars peeked through, a cruel reminder of the world outside, a world he needed to return to. He thought of his mother's face, the way her hands trembled when she hugged him before the trial, the tears she tried to hide when the guilty verdict was read. He thought of Elena, her sharp determination, her promise to uncover the truth. They were counting on him to survive, to hold on long enough for justice to find him. Another voice from the cells broke the stillness. Holt, time is running out. Darius exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of the bed frame until his knuckles turned white. Fear coiled in his stomach, but he did not let it show. He could not afford to. The men taunting him, the ones circling like sharks, they wanted to see him break. Not tonight. Not ever. He forced himself to lie back down, his head resting on the thin pillow. The voices continued, a relentless tide of hatred and malice, but he let them fade into the background. His focus turned inward, his thoughts sharpening like the edge of a blade. The Iron Fangs wanted him afraid. They wanted him broken before they struck again. But Darius would not give them that satisfaction. As his breathing steadied and his eyes drifted closed, he made a silent vow. He would survive this place. He would outlast the threats, the violence, the fear. And when the time came, he would expose the truth about the Iron Fangs, about the warden, about the people who thought they could destroy him. Darius Holt was not a man to be underestimated, and if the voices in the dark thought otherwise, they would learn soon enough. Darius sat in the visitation room, his broad shoulders slumped slightly as the tension of the last few nights weighed heavily on him. The pale fluorescent lights above cast a harsh glow, reflecting off the scratched plexiglass that separated him from Elena Voss. Her sharp, determined eyes locked onto his, but the look in his own was harder to read, strained, distant. Shadowed by fear he would not admit aloud. Elena adjusted her glasses and leaned closer to the small metal speaker built into the table. "Darius," she began, her voice steady but brimming with urgency, "I have got some good news." His eyebrows lifted slightly, but the guarded expression on his face did not shift. "Good news," he echoed, his voice low and rough, tinged with exhaustion. She nodded. "I found a way to fast-track your appeal. The discrepancies in the evidence, the missing files. It is too much for the judge to ignore. If all goes well, I think I can get you out of here." For a moment, her words hung in the air like a lifeline tossed to a drowning man. Darius wanted to reach for it, to let hope take root, but as quickly as the feeling came, it was smothered by the cold, relentless reality of where he was. "I do not know if I can make it," he said quietly, almost to himself. He leaned back in his chair, his hand rubbing at the back of his neck. "Elena, I do not know if I can make it in this place." Her expression faltered, the resolve in her eyes softening. "Darius, you are one of the strongest people I have ever met. You have survived things most people cannot even imagine. You can make it." He shook his head, his voice trembling slightly as he spoke. "This is not the battlefield, Elena. Out there I had my team, my weapons, a mission. In here, it is just me, and every second, every minute, I am waiting for the next hit to come. They are not going to stop until they break me." Elena's lips pressed into a thin line, her fingers tightening around the notepad in her lap. "The Iron Fangs." He nodded grimly. "They came at me. It was not a full assault. It was a warning. Vance made sure I knew what is coming. And the worst part, they are enjoying this. The taunts, the games. They know I am a target, and it is only a matter of time before they finish the job." Elena leaned forward, her tone shifting from empathetic to resolute. "Listen to me, Darius. I know it is hell in here, but you are stronger than them. You have faced worse, and you have come out the other side. You just have to hold on a little longer. I am working around the clock to get you out." Darius's gaze dropped to the table, his hands clasped tightly together. "And what happens if they get to me before then? What if all this work you are doing is for nothing because I did not make it to the end?" His voice cracked slightly, a rare moment of vulnerability slipping through. Elena hesitated, searching for the right words. "That is not going to happen," she said firmly, though even she could not hide the flicker of doubt in her eyes. "I will figure something out. Maybe I can push for you to be moved to solitary for protection or get the warden to put you in a safer block." Darius let out a hollow laugh, shaking his head. "The warden does not care. If anything, I think he is part of the reason I am in here in the first place. Solitary just makes it easier for them to get to me without anyone noticing." Her shoulders sagged slightly, the weight of his words hitting her. "Then you have to stay vigilant. Keep your head down. Do not engage unless you absolutely have to. You just need to last a little longer." Darius met her gaze, his eyes filled with something between frustration and desperation. "You say that like it is easy. Every time I close my eyes, I hear them. Every step I take, I feel them watching. They are waiting, Elena, waiting for me to slip. And I am." He stopped himself, swallowing hard. "You're what?" She pressed gently. "I am tired," he added, his voice barely above a whisper. "I do not know how much more I can take." Elena's expression softened, and she pressed her palm against the plexiglass as though trying to reach him. "Darius, I need you to dig deep. For your mother. For yourself. You are not just fighting for survival. You are fighting for justice, for your name. Do not let them take that from you." He exhaled slowly, her words sinking in. "I will try. That is all I can promise right now. I will try." The guard appeared at the door, signaling the end of their visit. Elena stood, gathering her things quickly. "I will be back with updates. Stay sharp, Darius. You are not alone in this." Darius rose, towering over the table as he gave her a small nod. "Thanks, Elena, for everything." As she left, the weight of her promise hung heavily in the air. It felt like an eternity. As Darius walked back to his cell, the faint laughter of the Iron Fangs echoed from somewhere down the corridor, a haunting reminder of the danger that loomed over every moment. He did not know if he could survive, but he would have to try. The cell was quiet, the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead the only constant sound. Darius sat on the edge of his thin mattress, staring at the concrete wall in front of him. Elena's words lingered in his mind. "You just need to last a little longer." But here, a little longer felt like a lifetime. It meant enduring more threats, more taunts, and possibly another attack. He could not just sit and wait. He needed to act. Darius's hands rested on his knees, his fingers twitching as he thought. His training had always been about preparation, anticipating the enemy's moves and staying one step ahead. And while he did not have his gear or his team, he still had his instincts. Those instincts had kept him alive in deserts, jungles, and urban war zones. They would have to work here too. He rose from the bed and began to scan his small cell with fresh eyes. Every crack, every corner, every piece of his limited possessions was suddenly a resource. His gaze landed on the handle of his toothbrush. It was not much, but with a little effort, it could become something. He snapped the bristles off and began to grind the plastic end against the rough concrete floor. The repetitive motion was grounding, giving his restless hands something to do while his mind calculated. It was not just about having a weapon, it was about sending a message. If the Iron Fangs came for him again, they needed to know he would not go down without a fight. During the brief free time in the yard, Darius moved with purpose. The open space was a dangerous place, filled with watchful eyes and simmering tensions. The Iron Fangs stayed in their usual spot, Vance's presence unmistakable as he laughed with his gang, clearly enjoying the attention his dominance brought. Darius kept his distance, moving toward the far corner of the yard where a cluster of older inmates lingered. They were not part of any gang, just men who had learned how to survive by keeping their heads down and staying out of the way. He approached a wiry man with gray streaks in his beard who went by the name Grady. Grady was known for his connections, a man who could get things done without drawing too much attention. "Grady," Darius said quietly, nodding in greeting. The older man glanced up, his sharp eyes studying Darius for a moment before he spoke. "You are the one the Fangs have their eyes on." Darius nodded, his voice low. "I need some help. Something to even the odds." Grady chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Evening the odds in this place is a tall order. What are you after?" Darius hesitated, his mind racing. "Metal, glass, something sharp, anything you have got." Grady raised an eyebrow. "You planning to take on Vance's crew by yourself?" "Not planning on it," Darius replied, "but I am not planning on letting them take me out either." The older man's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of respect crossing his face. "You have got guts. I will give you that, but guts do not count for much if you do not know the game. You bring heat on yourself. You bring heat on everyone. Keep that in mind." Darius nodded. "I am not looking to start a war, just to survive." Grady considered him for a long moment before finally sighing. "I will see what I can do, but it will not come cheap." "I have got a couple of commissary items I can trade," Darius said. "Cigarettes, maybe some instant coffee." Grady's lips twitched into a faint smirk. "That will do. I will have something for you." Back in his cell, Darius resumed his preparations. The toothbrush shiv was coming together, the plastic now honed to a sharp point. He wrapped a strip of cloth from his pillowcase around the handle to make it easier to grip. It was not much, but it was better than nothing. He thought about Elena's promise, about the glimmer of hope she had offered. To them, a little longer was more than enough time to finish him off. Darius's mind shifted to his military days, the lessons drilled into him by years of training. He remembered his commanding officer's words during survival drills: control what you can, adapt to what you cannot. He could not control the Iron Fangs, but he could control his response. He could not rely on the guards to protect him, but he could make himself harder to target. As the lights dimmed for lockdown, Darius sat on the edge of his bed, his weapon hidden under the mattress. He could hear the distant murmurs of the other inmates, the occasional shout or laugh echoing through the block. And then, as expected, the voices started. Vance's voice rang out from down the corridor, loud and mocking. "Hope you are sleeping well, soldier boy. You are going to need your rest." Laughter followed, harsh and cruel. Darius did not respond. He sat still, his fists clenched, his mind focused. He could not let their words get to him. Not now, not when he was so close to the edge. The sun beat down onto the yard, casting long shadows across the cracked concrete. Darius stood near the far corner, his back against the chain-link fence. The warmth of the sun on his skin was a faint reminder of life outside these walls, but the weight of the stairs around him quickly brought him back to reality. The Iron Fangs were moving. Darius had been watching them. Vance and his crew were not subtle. Their movements were deliberate as they prowled the yard, keeping him in their line of sight. The gang spread out, creating a net that slowly tightened as they closed in on him. It was a calculated maneuver, designed to make him feel trapped. Vance was the last to approach, his steps slow and purposeful, his smirk etched with cruel confidence. The gang fell in behind him, their tattoos gleaming with sweat, their sneers full of malice. The yard had grown quieter as other inmates turned their attention toward the unfolding scene. No one dared intervene, but all eyes were on Darius. Vance stopped a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, his head tilted slightly as he studied him. "Holt," he said, dragging out the name like it was a joke. "I have got to hand it to you. You have got guts standing out here like nothing is coming." Darius's gaze was steady, his posture calm but ready. "I am not looking for trouble." Vance chuckled, a low, menacing sound. "Oh, but trouble is looking for you, soldier boy. You see, there is a balance in this place. Everyone knows their place, except you. You have been walking around like you are untouchable, like you are better than the rest of us." Darius's hands remained at his sides, but his fingers twitched slightly, ready to move if necessary. "I do not think I am better than anyone. I just want to do my time and get out." The smirk on Vance's face widened, but his eyes darkened. "Do your time. That is cute. Problem is, you are not going to get that far." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Tonight is the night you die." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Darius's stomach tightened, but he refused to let it show. He met Vance's gaze head-on, his voice steady. "You sure you want to make that move?" Vance laughed, stepping back and motioning to his crew. "Oh, we are sure. And you know what? I am going to enjoy every second of it. You think that military training is going to save you? This is not a war zone, Holt. There is no team, no backup, just you and us." One of Vance's men, a stocky thug with a jagged scar across his cheek, stepped forward. "Hope you said your prayers, soldier boy. You are not making it through the night." The others laughed, their voices a chorus of cruelty. Darius stayed silent, his eyes scanning their faces, cataloging their movements, their tells. They were trying to rattle him, to make him slip. Vance leaned in again, his voice dripping with venom. "You can try to run. You can try to fight. But no one is coming to save you. And when it is over, when you are lying on that cold, hard floor, bleeding out, I will make sure you know exactly who did it." Darius felt the weight of their words pressing down on him, but he forced himself to stay calm. Fear was a weapon, and he could not let them use it against him. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, his voice low and measured. "You had better make it count, because if I am still standing by morning, I will make sure none of you forget it." Vance's smirk faltered for the briefest moment, but it returned quickly, sharper this time. "We will see about that, Holt. Tick-tock." With that, Vance turned and walked away, his crew following like a pack of wolves retreating after marking their prey. The yard slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the tension lingered, thick and suffocating. Darius stood still for a moment, his mind racing. The threat was not empty. He could see it in their eyes, hear it in their voices. They were coming for him. And if he was not ready, it would be the end. As he walked back to his cell, he clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. He had faced death before, but this felt different. There was no mission, no greater cause, just survival. Reaching his cell, he sat on the edge of his bed, pulling the makeshift shiv from under the mattress. Pshaw! He ran his thumb along the edge, testing its sharpness. It was not perfect, but it was all he had. Darius leaned back against the wall, his eyes closing briefly as he took a deep breath. He was not just fighting for himself. He was fighting to get out, to prove his innocence, to take back the life that had been stolen from him. The Iron Fangs would come, and when they did, Darius Holt would be ready. The echo of running water filled the shower room, steam rising in thin, ghostly wisps from the tiled floor. Darius stood beneath one of the spigots, the lukewarm water cascading over his shoulders. The room was quiet. Too quiet. There was no chatter, no background noise of shuffling feet or idle banter. The usual hum of prison life was replaced by a tense, eerie stillness that set his nerves on edge. He turned slightly, his eyes scanning the room. The rows of shower heads stretched out, the white tiles stained and cracked with years of neglect. No one else was in here. That alone was unusual. His instinct screamed at him to leave, but before he could act, the sound of heavy boots echoed from the entrance. He turned sharply, water dripping from his hair, and saw them, Vance and the Iron Fangs. There were 6 of them, their silhouettes cutting through the steam like specters. Vance was at the front, his smirk wide and cruel, his hands casually in his pockets as if this was just another day in the yard. "Holt," Vance drawled, his voice echoing ominously in the confined space. "Guess you did not get the memo. Shower time has been rescheduled, just for you." Darius did not respond. His eyes darted toward the entrance. 2 of Vance's men moved to block the only exit, their broad frames filling the doorway. Vance tilted his head, feigning disappointment. "What is the matter, soldier boy? You are not running already, are you?" Darius stepped back slowly, his bare feet gripping the wet tiles as his mind raced. He was cornered, outnumbered, and unarmed, except for the shiv he had hidden beneath the waistband of his prison pants. Vance's smirk widened as he stepped forward. "We told you this was coming, did not we? This is the night." The first man lunged, a wiry figure with a scar running down his cheek. Darius reacted instinctively, sidestepping the attack and driving an elbow into the man's ribs. The attacker grunted, stumbling back, but before Darius could follow up, another came at him from the side. The punch caught him in the jaw, sending him reeling. He staggered, barely managing to keep his footing as the room seemed to close in around him. "Not so tough now, huh?" One of the gang members sneered, his voice cutting through the steam. Darius did not answer. He shook off the hit, his vision clearing just in time to see the next attacker, a stocky man with tattoos covering his neck, charging at him. Darius ducked low, driving his shoulder into the man's stomach and slamming him into the wall. The impact sent a sickening thud through the room, but Darius did not have time to celebrate. Another pair of hands grabbed him from behind, yanking him backward. He twisted, his elbow connecting with the attacker's face, but the man held on, his grip like a vice. Vance watched from a distance, leaning casually against the wall. "This is pathetic," he said, laughing. "Come on, Holt. Show us that military training, or was all that talk just hot air?" Darius growled, pulling the shiv from his waistband. The sharp edge gleamed briefly in the dim light as he slashed at the arms holding him. The man yelped, letting go, and Darius spun around, his breathing heavy, his body coiled and ready. But the gang did not falter. They moved as one, circling him, their movements deliberate and practiced. This was not a random ambush. They had planned this. The next attack came from his left. Darius swung the shiv. The plastic edge sliced through the steam, but the attacker dodged, landing a punch to Darius's ribs. Pain shot through him, but he did not stop. He drove his shoulder into the man, sending him sprawling to the floor, only to be grabbed again by another. They were overwhelming him, their numbers and coordination pressing him into a corner. Vance finally stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "Let me show you how it is done, boys." Vance's punch came fast and hard, catching Darius in the side of the head. The world spun for a moment, and Darius fell to his knees. The taste of blood filled his mouth, and he struggled to breathe as the gang closed in, their laughter echoing around him. "Looks like the great Darius Holt is not so great after all," Vance taunted, grabbing a handful of Darius's hair and pulling his head back. "Any last words, soldier boy?" Darius's grip tightened on the shiv. His body ached, his vision blurred, but he was not done yet. With a surge of strength, he swung upward, the blade slicing across Vance's forearm. Vance howled, stumbling back and clutching his arm. The gang froze for a moment, the shock of seeing their leader injured breaking their momentum. Darius used the opening to scramble to his feet, his chest heaving as he faced them. His odds were slim, but he was not going down without a fight. "Finish him!" Vance roared, his voice filled with rage. The gang surged forward again, and Darius braced himself, his heart pounding as the fight descended into chaos. Darius's back hit the cold tiles, his ribs screaming in protest as he struggled to stay upright. The Iron Fangs swarmed him like a pack of wolves, their movements relentless and brutal. The shiv in his hand was his only lifeline, its sharp edge slashing through the steam-filled air, keeping them just far enough away to avoid being overwhelmed. Vance barked orders from the corner, his face twisted in rage as he clutched the bleeding gash on his forearm. "Do not let up! He is nothing! Take him down!" The largest of the gang lunged at Darius, his bulk a wall of muscle and momentum. Darius sidestepped, driving the shiv into the man's shoulder. A howl of pain echoed through the room as the attacker stumbled, but another gang member was already on Darius's back, his arm locking around Darius's throat. Darius gritted his teeth, his vision narrowing as he felt the pressure cutting off his air. He slammed his head backward, the back of his skull connected with the attacker's nose. The satisfying crunch of cartilage gave him just enough space to break free. Spinning around and landing a hard punch to the man's jaw, he fought on, but there were too many of them. A sharp kick to his side sent Darius sprawling to the ground. The shiv skittered across the wet tiles, out of reach. He gasped for air, his muscles burning as he tried to crawl toward the weapon. "Not so tough now, are you?" One of the gang members sneered, delivering another kick to his ribs. Darius curled inward, protecting himself as best he could, but the blows kept coming. His mind raced, desperate for a way out, for any opening he could exploit, but the gang was relentless, their attacks coordinated and merciless. Vance stepped forward, his boots splashing in the puddles on the floor. He crouched next to Darius, his grin predatory. "This is what happens when you do not know your place, Holt. You are just another piece of meat in this place, and now you are going to bleed like one." Darius tried to move, but a heavy hand pressed him back down. His breaths came in ragged gasps, his body screaming in pain. He felt the cold edge of a shiv press against his neck, the weight of his situation crushing down on him. And then, like a thunderclap, the sound of a baton striking metal shattered the chaos. "Back off!" A voice roared, commanding and unmistakable. The gang froze, their heads snapping toward the entrance. Standing there, baton in hand and fury in his eyes, was Brody Ellis, the guard who had served under Darius during his Delta Force days. "What the hell is going on in here?" Brody bellowed, stepping into the room with authority. His presence alone seemed to shift the dynamic, the gang hesitating as they weighed their next move. Vance's smirk faltered, but he quickly masked it with bravado. "This does not concern you, Ellis. Walk away." Brody's baton struck the tiles with a loud crack, the sound reverberating through the room. "I said back off, or do you want me to call in every guard on this block and have you all dragged out of here in cuffs?" The gang exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence wavering. Vance's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists as he stared Brody down. "You think you can protect him? This is not over." Brody took another step forward, his baton at the ready. "You are right. It is not. But if you do not get out of here right now, I will make sure it is over for all of you, permanently." Vance hesitated, his pride warring with his sense of self-preservation. After a tense moment, he motioned to his crew. "Let us go." The gang retreated, their footsteps echoing as they disappeared into the corridor. Vance lingered for a second longer, his glare fixed on Darius. "This is not over, Holt. Not by a long shot." Brody waited until the last of them was gone before rushing to Darius's side. "Jesus, Darius," he muttered, crouching down to help him sit up. "They really did a number on you." Darius coughed, tasting blood, but he managed a faint smirk. "I have had worse." Brody shook his head, his expression tight with anger. "You should not even be here. You do not belong in this place." Darius's eyes met Brody's, the weight of his situation reflected in his gaze. "Tell me something I do not know." Brody helped him to his feet, his grip steady. "Come on, let us get you cleaned up. And Darius, keep that shiv close. They will be back." Darius nodded, his body aching with every step as they left the shower room. The fight was not over, not by a long shot, but for now, he was still standing, and as long as he was standing, he was not going down without a fight. Darius sat on the edge of his bed, his ribs aching with every shallow breath. His head rested against the cold concrete wall, his swollen knuckles still faintly stained with blood from the fight. The dim light above flickered intermittently, casting shadows that danced across his bruised face. He closed his eyes, the events of the shower room replaying in his mind. He could still feel the weight of Vance's hand on his neck, the searing pain of every punch, the certainty that he was not going to leave that room alive. A sharp knock on the bars of his cell startled him. His eyes snapped open. He instinctively tensed, his body coiling as if ready for another attack. But when he looked up, he saw Brody Ellis standing there, his expression unreadable, but his presence steady. "Darius," Brody said. Darius glanced up and down the corridor, ensuring no one was watching, before stepping closer to the bars. "You all right?" Darius exhaled, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "Been better." Brody leaned against the bars, his baton tucked under his arm. "I had a feeling they would come at you sooner or later. Vance does not let anyone make him look weak. And you cut deep, literally and figuratively." Darius smirked faintly, but the pain in his side turned it into a grimace. "Thought that was it for me if you had not shown up." His voice trailed off, the weight of what could have been settling over him. Brody nodded, his jaw tightening. "You were holding your own longer than most would have, but let us not sugarcoat it. They had you, Darius. They had you, and they are going to come again." Darius rubbed a hand over his face, his fingers brushing against the bruises forming along his cheekbone. "Yeah, I figured as much." Brody lowered his voice, his tone grim but tinged with regret. "Look, I cannot do much. The warden has got his own rules, and most of the guards here do not care what happens to someone like you. They will not stick their necks out. Not for you, not for anyone." Darius's stomach sank, the brief hope he had felt flickering like a candle in the wind. But Brody continued, leaning in closer. "I will do what I can. I will keep an eye on Vance and his crew. Try to keep them off you for a while. It is not much, but it is something." Darius looked up at him, a faint spark of gratitude in his eyes. "Why are you doing this, Brody? You could have let them finish me off. No one would have blamed you." Brody hesitated, his gaze dropping for a moment. "Because I know who you are, Darius. I know what you have done, the lives you have saved. Hell, I was one of them. Back in Kandahar when things went sideways, you did not leave anyone behind. You risked your life for your team. For me." Darius blinked, the memory surfacing. A chaotic firefight, smoke and sand everywhere. Brody pinned down and screaming for help. Darius had dragged him out, bullets whizzing past them, the heat of an explosion searing his back. "You did not leave me," Brody said, his voice firm. "So I am not leaving you. Not now." Darius's throat tightened, his usual stoicism cracking under the weight of Brody's words. For the first time in a long time, he felt something other than fear or anger. "Hope. You do not know what that means to me," Darius said quietly. Brody straightened, his grip tightening on his baton. "Do not thank me yet. Vance and his crew are not going to stop just because I showed up once. They are going to push harder, and you need to be ready. You have got to stay sharp. Stay alive." Darius nodded, his resolve solidifying. "I have been through worse. I will make it." Brody offered a faint smile, though his eyes remained serious. "You are tougher than anyone in this place, Darius. Just do not let them break you, and keep that shiv close. I cannot be everywhere." Darius managed a dry chuckle. "Already ahead of you." Brody stepped back, his gaze lingering on Darius for a moment before he turned to leave. "I will check in when I can. Keep your head down." As the sound of Brody's boots faded down the corridor, Darius leaned back against the wall, his hands resting on his thighs. For the first time since he had been thrown into this hellhole, he did not feel completely alone. He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. The fight in the shower room had left him battered and shaken, but it had not broken him. And now, with Brody in his corner, even if only quietly, he felt a glimmer of hope. "I can do this," Darius whispered to himself, the words barely audible but carrying a weight of determination. He was not out of danger yet, not by a long shot, but as long as he had someone on his side, someone who believed in him, he had a chance. And that was enough to keep him going. Darius sat in the same cold chair in the visitation room, the scratched plexiglass separating him from Elena once again. The sound of the door slamming shut behind him made his heart sink. He did not know why, but something about the way she avoided meeting his gaze immediately told him this was not going to be the good news he desperately needed. Elena adjusted her glasses, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of the notepad in her lap. She looked tired, worn thin by the battle she was fighting for him outside these walls. But it was not her weariness that mattered. It was the hesitation. "Darius," he said, his voice low and strained. "What is going on?" She let out a slow breath, finally meeting his eyes. "Darius, there has been a delay." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He felt the air leave his lungs, his chest tightening as his pulse quickened. "A delay? What do you mean, a delay?" Elena leaned closer, her voice soft but urgent, trying to steady him. "The judge wants more time to review the evidence we submitted. It is a good thing. It means they are taking it seriously, but it also means your appeal hearing has been pushed back." Darius's hands clenched into fists on the table, his knuckles turning white. He could not stop the tremor in his voice. "Another delay, Elena. I barely made it through the last one. You do not understand what it is like in here. They are not waiting. They are coming for me every day." "I do understand," she said quickly, her voice firm but empathetic. "I know how dangerous it is, Darius. I am doing everything I can to get you out, but this process takes time." "I do not have time," Darius snapped, his voice rising. The guard standing near the door shifted slightly, eyeing them, but Darius forced himself to lower his tone. "Elena, they are not going to stop. Vance and his crew, they have already come after me twice. I barely walked away last time, and that was because someone intervened. If they come at me again—" He trailed off, shaking his head, his jaw tight. Elena's eyes softened, guilt flickering across her face. "I know, Darius. I know this is unfair, and I hate that you are in this situation. But this is the only way to clear your name. If I push too hard, if I cut corners, they will shut it down. We will lose everything." Darius exhaled sharply, leaning back in his chair, his hands running over his face. He could feel the panic clawing at him, the walls of the room seeming to close in. "I do not know if I can do it, Elena. I do not know if I can survive." Elena reached her hand toward the glass, her palm pressed flat against it. It was a small, futile gesture, but it carried a weight of reassurance. "Listen to me, Darius. You have survived things that would have killed most people. You have been through hell before and you came out stronger. I know you are scared. I would be too. But you can get through this. You have to." Darius's eyes met hers. On Darius's, a mix of fear and frustration swirling within them. "You are not the one who has to watch your back every second. You are not the one who has to fight off 6 guys in a shower room just to stay alive. I am doing everything I can, Elena, but it is not enough. I am not enough." Her voice softened, the intensity in her gaze unwavering. "You are enough, Darius. You are stronger than they are, and you are not alone. You have me. You have Brody. You are not fighting this alone." Darius's laugh was bitter, his head shaking slightly. "Brody cannot watch me all the time. He is already risking enough just checking in on me. And you are out there, not in here. You do not know what it is like to feel like every shadow is someone waiting to kill you." Elena hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. "You are right. I do not know what it is like, but I do know what it is like to fight for something that seems impossible. I know what it is like to feel like the whole world is against you. And I know what it is like to come out the other side." Darius swallowed hard, his throat dry. "One more delay," he said again, his voice heavy with resignation. Elena nodded slowly. "Hold on a little longer, Darius. That is all I am asking. Hold on a little longer, and I will get you out of this place. I promise." He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table as he stared at the scratched plexiglass. "I do not know if I believe in promises anymore," he said quietly. Elena's expression did not falter. "Then believe in yourself. Believe in the man who survived everything this world has thrown at him. You can do this." The guard stepped closer, signaling the end of their visit. Elena stood, gathering her things, but her eyes never left Darius's. "I will be back as soon as I can. Stay sharp. Stay alive." Darius nodded faintly, watching as she left the room. The door closed with a loud clang, leaving him alone with his thoughts. The words echoed in his mind as he walked back to his cell, his legs feeling heavier with every step. The threats, the fear, the violence, they would all be waiting for him. But somehow he had to endure, because if he did not, the truth about who framed him would die with him. Darius sat in his cell, his mind racing as he stared at the makeshift shiv he had crafted. His body still ached from the beatings, and his ribs throbbed with every shallow breath. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the mental weight crushing him. Waiting for the Iron Fangs to strike again was not survival, it was suicide. He needed to do something different, something bold if he was going to last. He could not just play defense anymore. He had to take the fight to them. In the yard, Darius scanned the crowd, his sharp eyes seeking an opportunity. The Iron Fangs were not the only power players in the prison. The gangs did not mix, each carving out their territory like feuding kingdoms. But he knew that alliances were sometimes formed out of necessity. Darius's attention settled on a group near the far fence, the Strikers. They were smaller in number, mostly black and Latino men who kept to themselves but were known to hold their own when pushed. Their leader, Mateo Vargas, was a wiry man with tattoos snaking up his arms and a reputation for pragmatism. Darius approached slowly, his every movement deliberate, to avoid drawing unwanted attention. As he neared, a couple of strikers stiffened, their hands twitching toward their makeshift weapons. "I am not here to start anything," Darius said evenly, his voice calm but firm. Mateo glanced up from where he sat on a makeshift bench, his dark eyes narrowing as he studied Darius. "Then why are you here?" Darius stopped a few feet away, keeping his posture neutral but strong. "I need help, and I am willing to pay for it." Mateo smirked, leaning back. "Help from us? You know how this works, Holt. If you are asking for help, you are bringing your problems to my doorstep. Why would I want that?" "Because I am not looking for a free handout," Darius replied, his voice low but steady. "I know you do not like the Iron Fangs. You and I both know they think they run this place. I can give you an opening to hit back." The men around Mateo exchanged glances, murmuring among themselves. Mateo raised a hand, silencing them. "You want us to go to war with Vance and his crew? You think we are stupid?" Darius shook his head. "Not war, just a statement. They have been coming after me, and I know they are not going to stop, but they are not untouchable. I just need a little backup to take a few of them out of play. Send a message." Mateo tilted his head, considering. "And what do we get out of this?" "I will owe you," Darius said simply. "You give me protection, and I will make it worth your while. Commissary trades, intel, whatever you need." Mateo's smirk returned, but there was a hint of respect in his gaze now. "You have got guts. I will give you that. But guts do not always pay off in here." "They do when they are backed by results," Darius countered. "I have taken hits before, but I am still standing. If you help me take a few of them down, it will show everyone in this yard that the Iron Fangs are not invincible. That is worth more than commissary." Mateo leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees as he locked eyes with Darius. The yard was buzzing around them, but in that moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of them. "Okay," Mateo said finally, "you have got yourself a deal. But if this goes sideways, you are on your own. Got it?" "Got it," Darius said, his tone unwavering. That night, the plan went into motion. Mateo had tipped him off to a weak link in the Iron Fangs, a younger member named Nolan who often broke off from the group after lights out to sneak contraband through the cell blocks. Darius waited in the shadows near the corridor, his shiv hidden in the sleeve of his shirt. The faint hum of the overhead lights was the only sound as he watched Nolan's wiry frame approach, his steps light and casual. Darius stepped out, blocking his path. Nolan froze, his eyes widening. "What the hell do you want?" "To send a message," Darius said coldly. Nolan's hand darted to his waistband, but Darius was faster. He lunged forward, slamming Nolan against the wall and pressing the shiv to his neck. "You tell Vance this stops now," Darius growled. "He comes at me again, and I will make sure he is next. You got that?" Nolan swallowed hard, his breath coming in shallow gasps. "You are dead, Holt. You do not scare us." Darius pressed the shiv harder, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "You sure about that? Because I have got nothing to lose, and I promise you I will take as many of you with me as I can. Now go." He stepped back, letting Nolan stumble away, his face pale and his confidence shattered. From the shadows, Mateo emerged, nodding approvingly. "Not bad, Holt. Not bad at all." Darius did not respond. His eyes were fixed on the empty corridor ahead. The Iron Fangs would come for him again. He knew that. But now he was not just waiting for them. He was ready to fight back. Darius stood in the dim, damp hallway near the laundry room, his back pressed against the cold concrete wall. The faint sound of machines whirring in the background did nothing to ease the tension. He was not alone. Mateo and 3 other strikers flanked him, their expressions grim and determined. They knew what was coming. "They are bringing everyone," Mateo murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "You sure you want to do this here? Guards are not going to step in if things get ugly." Darius's jaw tightened, his eyes scanning the empty corridor ahead. "I do not have a choice. If we do not stop them now, they will keep coming. They will take me apart piece by piece until there is nothing left." Mateo nodded, his lips pressing into a thin line. "All right, but if we are doing this, we do it right. No mercy." The sound of heavy boots echoed from the far end of the hallway, growing louder with each step. Vance's voice carried through the air, sharp and mocking. "Holt! You hiding back here like a rat? Thought you were tougher than that." Darius took a deep breath, steadying himself. He felt the weight of the shiv tucked into his waistband and the tension coiling in his muscles. This was not just about survival anymore. This was about ending the threat for good. Vance appeared first, his smirk wide and cruel, flanked by 8 of his men. Their eyes gleamed with malice, their hands clutching makeshift weapons, pipes, shivs, and broken broom handles sharpened to points. "Well, well," Vance drawled, stopping a few feet away. "Look who decided to bring friends. Cute, but it will not save you." Darius stepped forward, his voice cold and steady. "This ends here, Vance. You come at me again, and none of you are walking out of here." Vance's smirk twisted into a sneer. "Big talk for a dead man." The fight erupted without warning. One of Vance's men lunged, swinging a pipe aimed at Darius's head. Darius ducked, the metal whistled past his ear, and he countered with a hard punch to the man's gut. The attacker doubled over, and Darius followed up with a knee to his face, sending him crashing to the ground. The hallway exploded into chaos as the 2 groups clashed. The confined space amplified the grunts, yells, and sickening thuds of fists and weapons connecting with flesh. Mateo tackled one of the Iron Fangs, slamming him into the wall and driving a shiv into his shoulder. Another striker grappled with 2 attackers at once, his fists flying in quick, brutal succession. Darius turned just in time to block a wild swing from Vance. Their eyes met, and for a moment the chaos around them seemed to fade. Vance's grin was gone, replaced by pure rage. "You are done, Holt," Vance snarled, lunging again. Darius sidestepped, grabbing Vance's arm and twisting it hard. The gang leader grunted in pain, but he used his free hand to drive a fist into Darius's ribs. Darius stumbled back, his breath hitching, but he recovered quickly, slashing at Vance with his shiv. The blade caught Vance's forearm, drawing a deep gash. Vance roared, staggering back as blood dripped onto the floor. The fight raged on around them. Darius caught glimpses of the strikers holding their own, their movements precise and ruthless. But the Iron Fangs were not backing down. For every man that fell, another surged forward, their attacks fueled by desperation and hatred. Darius blocked a strike from one of the larger gang members, using his momentum to slam the man into the wall. The impact sent a dull crack through the air, and the man crumpled to the ground. "Holt!" Vance roared, charging at him again. Darius braced himself. Their bodies collided in a brutal grapple. Vance swung wildly, his fist connecting with Darius's side and jaw, but Darius fought back with equal ferocity. He drove his elbow into Vance's face, then followed up with a knee to his stomach. Vance staggered, blood streaming from his nose, but he did not go down. He grabbed a pipe from the floor, swinging it with all his strength. Darius dodged. The pipe grazed his shoulder, and he retaliated with a punch that sent Vance reeling. Around them, the hallway was a battlefield. Bodies littered the floor, groaning and bloodied, but the fight was not over. The Iron Fangs were relentless, their attacks growing more frantic as their numbers dwindled. Darius felt the strain in his muscles, the ache in his ribs, but he could not stop. He could not afford to. He knew that if he let up even for a second, they would tear him apart. "Keep going," Mateo shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Darius gritted his teeth, his focus narrowing on Vance. He lunged, driving the shiv into Vance's thigh. The gang leader screamed, dropping the pipe as he fell to one knee. "It is over," Darius said, his voice low and deadly. Vance glared up at him, his chest heaving. "You think this is over? You think you have won?" Darius did not answer. He turned to face the remaining gang members, his stance steady despite the pain radiating through his body. "This ends now," he said, his voice echoing through the hallway. The Iron Fangs hesitated, their confidence finally cracking. They exchanged uncertain glances, the fight draining out of them as they saw their leader on his knees, bleeding and beaten. The hallway was a battlefield, the air thick with the metallic tang of blood and the sounds of groaning men. Darius stood in the middle of the chaos, his chest heaving, his grip on the shiv firm, but his muscles trembling with exhaustion. Vance was on one knee, clutching the wound in his thigh, blood seeping through his fingers. The Iron Fangs were faltering, the confidence that had carried them into this ambush shattered, replaced by fear and uncertainty. Darius's voice cut through the tense silence, sharp and commanding. "This is your last chance. Walk away, or I will make sure none of you leave this hallway upright." One of Vance's lieutenants, a stocky man with a jagged scar across his cheek, stepped forward, his grip tightening on a broken pipe. "You think we are just going to roll over? You do not scare us, Holt." Darius's gaze locked onto him, cold and unyielding. "Then step up and find out." The lieutenant hesitated, glancing back at his comrades. The hesitation cost him. Before he could react, Darius closed the distance in a burst of movement, slamming his shoulder into the man's chest and driving him back into the wall. The pipe clattered to the ground as Darius delivered a brutal punch to his gut, then another to his jaw, sending him crumpling to the floor. Vance's remaining men hesitated, their resolve cracking. They had never expected this. A single man, outnumbered, turning their ambush into their defeat. But one of them, younger and desperate, charged at Darius with a wild yell. Darius sidestepped the attack, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting it sharply. The makeshift shiv the younger man had been holding fell to the ground, and Darius drove his knee into the man's stomach before tossing him to the side. The strikers were still in the fight, keeping the rest of the Iron Fangs at bay. Mateo was a blur of motion, his shiv flashing as he disarmed one man and delivered a swift elbow to another's temple. The other strikers moved with practiced efficiency, their strikes precise and brutal. Vance tried to rise, his face twisted in pain and fury. "You think you have won, Holt?" he spat, his voice hoarse. "This does not end here." Darius turned to him, his expression hard. "No, it ends here, right now." He stepped forward, grabbing Vance by the collar and hauling him to his feet. Vance swung a wild punch, but Darius caught his wrist, twisting it until Vance cried out. With a shove, Darius slammed Vance against the wall, pinning him there. "You brought this on yourself," Darius said, his voice low and dangerous. "You could have left me alone. You could have walked away. But now you are going to pay for every threat, every attack, every man you sent after me." Vance's defiance flickered, replaced by the faintest hint of fear. "You do not have the guts," he sneered. Though his voice wavered, Darius leaned in, his grip tightening. "Try me." With a sharp twist, Darius drove his knee into Vance's stomach, doubling him over. He let Vance fall to the ground, coughing and gasping for air, before stepping back. The hallway was littered with bodies, Iron Fangs groaning and bleeding, their will to fight completely shattered. Mateo and the strikers stood at the ready, but there was no need. The fight was over. Darius surveyed the scene, his chest rising and falling heavily, every muscle in his body aching, his ribs screaming in protest. But he stood tall. He had done what he had to do. He had sent a message. "Get them out of here," Darius said, his voice firm but tired. The remaining Iron Fangs scrambled to their feet, dragging their injured comrades away. Vance was the last to move, his glare full of hatred but his body too broken to do anything about it. "This is not over, Holt," Vance growled as he limped down the hallway, blood dripping with every step. Darius did not respond, his focus already shifting. He knew better than to believe Vance's threats were empty, but for now, he had won. Hours later, Darius sat in the infirmary, his side heavily bandaged and his body resting against the stiff mattress of the cot. The nurse had scolded him for overexerting himself, but he barely heard her words. His mind was spinning, the adrenaline from the fight still coursing through his veins. The infirmary was quiet, a sanctuary compared to the chaos he had just endured. For the first time in a long time, Darius felt like he could breathe. He stared at the ceiling, his thoughts racing. He knew this was not the end. Vance would not stop, and the Iron Fangs would come back stronger. But for now, he had time. Time to recover, time to think, time to prepare. A faint smirk crossed his lips despite the pain radiating through his body. He had survived. For now, that was enough. Darius sat in the hard plastic chair of the visitation room, exhaustion etched into every line of his bruised face. The fight with Vance's crew had left him battered, and the relief of surviving was already fading as the reality of what lay ahead set in. Elena Voss walked in briskly, her sharp, determined gaze zeroing in on him. She hesitated for a fraction of a second when she saw his injuries, but quickly masked her concern. She sat down across from him, leaning forward, her voice calm but firm. "Darius, I have good news. We have got the judge's decision. The appeal worked. You are getting out." Darius froze. Her words hung in the air for a moment. All he could do was blink, the weight of the statement settling over him. "You are getting out?" he asked, his voice slow, almost disbelieving. Elena nodded. "It is official. They will process you. By this time, you will be out of this hellhole." Relief washed over Darius, but it did not last long. His mind immediately shifted to the night ahead. "One more night," he muttered, more to himself than to her. Elena picked up on his tone, her brows knitting together. "Darius, you have already done the hard part. You just have to hold on a little longer." Darius leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together, his voice low and tense. "It is not that simple, Elena. Vance and his crew are not just after me for kicks. We both know someone put them up to this." Elena nodded slowly. "We know someone hired them. You do not have to prove that tonight. Once you are out, Wesot, I can dig into the details. You just need to survive." Darius shook his head, his expression grim. "If I leave here without answers, it will not stop. Whoever hired Vance will not just give up because I am on the outside. They will come after me again, and they will be smarter about it next time. If I do not find out who it is and why they want me dead, I will be looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life." "Why?" Elena leaned back in her chair, her lips pressing into a thin line. "And you think Vance is just going to tell you?" "That is not how this works. He will never admit anything unless he has got a reason." "I will give him a reason," Darius said, his voice steady and cold. "Vance thrives on fear, on power. If I can take that away from him, even for a second, he will crack. He is too arrogant to keep quiet if he thinks he has already lost." Elena frowned, worry flashing across her face. "Darius, you have already taken so many risks. You have made it this far. Do not push your luck now." Darius's jaw tightened. "This is not just about me anymore, Elena. It is about stopping whoever is behind this before they can ruin someone else's life the way they ruined mine. I have to do this." Elena studied him for a long moment, her expression softening. "If you are going to do this, be smart about it. You have already proven you can handle Vance and his crew, but you are not invincible." "Darius, if something goes wrong, it will not," he said quickly, cutting her off. "I cannot afford for it to go wrong." The guard stepped forward, signaling the end of their visit. Elena hesitated, then pressed her palm flat against the glass, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "Stay sharp, Darius. You are almost there." Darius nodded, his hand brushing against the glass. "Thanks, Elena, for everything." As he was escorted back to his cell, Darius's mind raced. Vance was not just a threat, he was a key. If Darius could corner him, break him, and get him to admit who had put the hit out, it would change everything. He had one night left in this hellhole, and he was not going to waste it waiting for another attack. Tonight he was going to take control. The air in the utility corridor was thick and stale, the faint hum of the overhead lights doing little to mask the oppressive silence. This part of the prison was rarely used at night, a perfect place for what Darius needed to do. He stood in the shadows near the far wall, his back pressed against the cold concrete. Every nerve in his body was on edge, his muscles tense and ready for what was about to unfold. Vance was alone, just as Darius had planned. The gang leader sauntered into the corridor, his swagger as confident as ever, despite the visible limp from the gash Darius had left in his thigh during their last encounter. Vance glanced over his shoulder, clearly unaware that he was being watched, his usual smirk plastered across his face. Darius stepped out of the shadows, his voice cold and sharp. "Looking for someone, Vance?" Vance froze, his body going rigid. He turned slowly, his eyes narrowing as they locked onto Darius. For the first time, there was a flicker of something other than confidence in his gaze. "Holt," he said, forcing a sneer. "Did not think you had it in you to come looking for me." Darius did not respond immediately. He took a step closer, his movements deliberate and controlled. The tension between them crackled like static electricity. "You and I need to talk." Darius said, his tone low and dangerous. Vance snorted, though his bravado seemed thinner now. Talk? That is not really your style, is it? Thought you would rather throw punches than words. Darius's lips twitched into a humorless smile. We will get there. Before Vance could react, Darius closed the distance between them, his fist connecting with Vance's jaw in a brutal, precise strike. The gang leader staggered back, his hand flying to his face as a snarl escaped his lips. You think you can intimidate me? Vance spat, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. You have got nothing on me, Holt. Darius grabbed him by the collar, slamming him into the wall with enough force to make the plaster crack. Wrong. I have got everything on you. You are a thug, Vance, and I have fought men 100 times tougher than you. Now tell me who hired you. Vance's sneer faltered, replaced by a flicker of panic that he quickly masked with anger. You are delusional. No one hired me. This is personal. Darius slammed him into the wall again, harder this time. Do not lie to me. I have seen your type before. Arrogant, overconfident, but you are not stupid. You would not risk coming after me unless someone was paying you to do it. Vance let out a strained laugh, though it sounded more desperate than amused. And what if I do not feel like talking? Darius's fist crashed into Vance's stomach, doubling him over. Vance coughed violently, the air rushing out of his lungs as he struggled to stay upright. Darius grabbed him by the back of the neck, forcing him to stand. You are going to talk, Darius growled, his voice a dangerous whisper. Because if you do not, I will make sure you are unrecognizable by the time I am done with you. Vance glared at him, his defiance wavering as he wiped the blood from his mouth. You do not scare me, he muttered, though his voice shook ever so slightly. Darius's fist connected with Vance's ribs. The sickening crunch echoed in the corridor. Vance cried out, his bravado crumbling as he clutched his side. Darius leaned in close, his voice cold and steady. Now, let us try this again. Who hired you? Vance's eyes darted around the corridor as though searching for an escape, but there was none. His breaths came in shallow gasps, and for the first time, genuine fear crossed his face. All right, he spat, his words laced with pain. I will talk. Darius released his grip slightly, giving Vance just enough room to breathe. I am listening. Vance's voice was shaky, his tough guy facade completely gone. It was a man named Preston Langford, big-shot businessman. Wanted you out of the way, said you were a problem, that you knew too much about some deal he was trying to close. Darius's eyes narrowed. Preston Langford, what is his full name? Preston Langford, Vance said quickly, desperation creeping into his tone. That is all I know, I swear. He paid me and my crew to make your life hell. Said we would get a bonus if we finished you off. Darius's jaw clenched, his grip tightening on Vance's collar. And what about the evidence? Did Langford plant it to frame me? Vance nodded frantically. Yeah, he said he had connections, people in the system who owed him favors. That is how he got you thrown in here. Darius stared at him for a long moment, his mind racing as the pieces began to fall into place. He finally let go, shoving Vance to the ground. You have got one chance to walk away from this, Vance. Stay out of my way, or I will finish what I started. Vance scrambled to his feet, his face pale and bloodied. He did not say another word as he stumbled out of the corridor, leaving Darius alone in the silence. Darius took a deep breath, his fists still clenched. He finally had an aim, a starting point. When he walked out of this prison, he would be ready to take the fight to the people who had tried to destroy him. But first, he had to survive the night. Darius sat on the edge of his cot in his dimly lit cell, his back against the cold concrete wall. The corridor outside was eerily quiet. The usual hum of nighttime noise reduced to an oppressive silence. The faint ache in his knuckles and ribs reminded him of his encounter with Vance. But it was not the pain keeping him awake. It was the weight of what came next. He glanced at the small clock mounted on the far wall, the red numbers ticking down the hours until morning. Just a few more hours and he would be processed out. Freedom was so close, but the knowledge of how precarious his situation was made it feel almost unreachable. Vance would not take this lying down. The Iron Fangs were not the type to let someone get the better of them without retaliation. Darius let out a slow breath, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. The name Preston Langford echoed in his mind, a grim reminder of the bigger fight waiting for him outside these walls. But first he had to make it through the night. Footsteps broke the silence outside his cell. Heavy, deliberate, and getting closer. Darius tensed, his muscles coiling as he listened. It was not a guard's lazy stroll. It was something else, something purposeful. He rose to his feet, his eyes fixed on the shadow creeping along the floor just beyond the bars. The figure stopped in front of his cell, and Darius's chest tightened as Vance appeared, his face still bruised and bloodied from their earlier encounter. Behind him were 3 other Iron Fangs, their expressions hard and unforgiving. One held a shiv, another clutched a jagged piece of metal, and the third carried what looked like a pipe. They did not bother with pretense this time. Vance's smirk was gone, replaced with something colder, darker. "You think you can humiliate me and just walk out of here, Holt?" His voice was low, venomous. "You have got a few hours left, and I am making sure you do not see them." Darius stepped closer to the bars, his posture calm but ready. "You really want to do this again, Vance? Last time did not go so well for you." Vance's laugh was harsh, bitter. "Last time you got lucky. This time I am not holding back." Darius's eyes flicked to the weapons in their hands, his mind calculating. His shiv was hidden beneath his mattress, within easy reach if they managed to get the door open. The guards were nowhere to be seen, and he knew better than to expect help. This was his fight, and it was not going to be pretty. Vance nodded to one of his men, who pulled out a crude key fashioned from a stolen tool. The lock clicked, and the cell door creaked open. Darius took a step back, his body tensing as the men filed in, their movements deliberate and predatory. Vance stayed at the entrance, his arms crossed as his men advanced. "Take your time," he said, his tone dripping with malice. "Make sure he feels every second of it." The first man lunged, swinging his pipe in a wide arc. Darius sidestepped, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting it sharply. The pipe clattered to the ground as Darius drove his elbow into the man's face, sending him sprawling onto the cot. The second man did not wait. He charged, shiv in hand, aiming for Darius's side. Darius grabbed the edge of the cot, flipping it up as a makeshift shield. The blade sank into the mattress, and Darius used the distraction to slam his fist into the man's stomach, then his jaw. The attacker crumpled, gasping for air. The third man hesitated for a split second, clearly unnerved by how quickly Darius had taken down the others, but Vance's glare pushed him forward. He swung the jagged piece of metal, aiming for Darius's head. Darius ducked. The weapon grazed his shoulder, and he countered with a brutal uppercut. The man staggered, but Darius did not let up, delivering a sharp kick to his knee that sent him crashing to the floor. Vance stepped forward now, his confidence waning, but his fury burning bright. "You think this changes anything?" he snarled. "You are still dead, Holt. Whether it is tonight or later, you are not walking out of here alive." Darius's chest heaved as he turned to face Vance, his fists bloody but steady. "You have already lost, Vance. I am still standing. Your men are down, and when I walk out of here, you will still be rotting in this hellhole." Vance roared, lunging at Darius with reckless abandon. The two collided in a chaotic grapple, fists flying and bodies slamming into the walls. Darius's ribs screamed in protest, but he fought through the pain, every movement driven by sheer willpower. With a final surge of strength, Darius drove Vance into the corner, pinning him against the wall, his forearm pressed against Vance's throat, cutting off his air. "This is over," Darius growled, his voice cold and unrelenting. "You have got nothing left." Vance struggled weakly, his face red and contorted with rage, but he could not break free. Finally, Darius let him go, stepping back as Vance slid to the floor, gasping for breath. Darius stood tall, his chest heaving as he surveyed the wreckage. The Iron Fangs were beaten, their leader broken, their will shattered. He staggered back to his cot, his body screaming in protest, but he allowed himself a faint, grim smile. He had survived the night. The morning came slowly, the faint rays of sunlight filtering through the narrow, grimy window of Darius's cell. His body ached from head to toe, his ribs wrapped tightly with bandages courtesy of a nurse who had barely glanced at him during the late-night checkup after the fight. But none of that mattered now. Today he was walking out of this hell. The clang of keys snapped him out of his thoughts. A guard appeared at the bars, clipboard in hand, and an expression of mild disinterest. "Holt, time to go." Darius exhaled deeply, rising from the cot with deliberate slowness. Every movement reminded him of the brutal battles he had survived, but the pain did not bother him. It was a reminder of what he had endured to make it to this moment. As he stepped out of the cell, he glanced down the hallway. Vance was slumped against the bars of his own cell, his face swollen and his lips split from the beating Darius had given him. Their eyes met briefly, and Vance's expression twisted into a hateful glare. "This is not over, Holt," Vance rasped, his voice hoarse. "You hear me? You are not safe out there." Darius's lips curled into a faint smirk, his tone steady and cold. "You keep saying that, Vance, but here I am, walking out while you are stuck in this cage. Looks like I am the one who won." Vance slammed his hand against the bars, but Darius did not look back. The sound faded behind him as he followed the guard down the corridor, each step bringing him closer to freedom. The processing room was stark and clinical, its walls painted a lifeless gray. Darius stood silently as the clerk went through the usual motions, handing over his personal belongings, a watch, a wallet, and the dog tags he had not seen since the day he had been incarcerated. He held the tags in his hand for a moment, the cool metal pressing against his skin like a lifeline. They were a reminder of who he was, who he still had to be. The clerk droned on, explaining the release process, but Darius barely listened. His mind was already on what came next. He had a name now, Preston Langford, and a purpose. He would not rest until the man who had put him through hell faced justice. As the final papers were signed, Elena walked into the room, her heels clicking softly against the floor. Her sharp eyes immediately landed on Darius, and a faint smile tugged at her lips. "Darius." He turned, his face softening ever so slightly. "Elena." She approached, her expression a mix of relief and determination. "I thought I would meet you here, make sure everything went smoothly." Darius nodded, slipping his dog tags over his head. "Thanks for everything. I would not be here without you." Elena's smile grew, but there was a seriousness in her eyes. "You are out now, Darius, but this fight is not over. Langford is still out there." Darius's jaw tightened at the name. "I know. He is the reason I am in this mess, and he is the reason I cannot just walk away. But now I have a chance to do something about it." Elena hesitated, her voice dropping slightly. "You do not have to do this alone, you know. I have already started digging into Langford's background. He is careful, but no one is untouchable." Darius studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded. "Good, because I am not stopping until I bring him down." The guard signaled that it was time to leave, and Elena stepped aside, letting Darius walk toward the door. As he crossed the threshold, the bright sunlight hit him like a wave, warm and blinding after the fluorescent glare in shadowy corridors. He paused for a moment, letting the warmth wash over him before stepping fully into the outside world. The car ride was quiet, the hum of the engine the only sound as Elena drove them away from the prison. Darius stared out the window, watching the landscape pass by in a blur of green and gray. His body was still sore, but his mind was sharp, focused on what came next. "You have got somewhere to stay?" Elena asked, breaking the silence. Darius nodded. "I will figure it out. First, I need to regroup, get my head on straight." "And Langford?" she pressed gently. Darius's gaze hardened, his voice low. "He is next." Elena nodded, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. "Just promise me you will be careful. Whoever Langford is, he has resources. He managed to frame you, hire a gang to kill you in prison, and keep his hands clean. He is not someone to underestimate." Darius's lips twitched into a faint smile. "I do not underestimate anyone, but Langford made one mistake. He did not finish the job. Now it is my turn." Elena did not respond, but the weight of his words hung heavily in the air. As they pulled up to the small apartment Elena had arranged for him, Darius stepped out, his movement slow and deliberate. The scars of his time in prison were fresh, but his resolve was unshakable. He turned to Elena, offering her a nod of thanks before heading inside. Once alone, Darius sat at the small, bare table, pulling out a notepad and pen. He wrote one word at the top of the page, Langford. Beneath it, he began listing everything Vance had told him, every connection he could think of. The next phase of his fight had begun. He was not just free. He was armed with the truth, and that made him more dangerous than ever. Darius sat at the table in the dimly lit apartment, his fingers tracing the edge of the notepad in front of him. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of traffic outside. On the page, the name Preston Langford stared back at him, circled twice in heavy pen strokes. Beneath it, a scattered web of notes, fragments of information Vance had spilled under duress. Each word was a piece of a puzzle that Darius knew he had to solve. He leaned back in his chair, the faint ache in his ribs reminding him of just how close he had come to losing everything. But pain did not matter now. He was free, and the man who had taken everything from him was within reach. Langford had framed him, orchestrated the attacks in prison, and tried to bury him. That kind of arrogance left trails, no matter how careful someone thought they were. Elena had left him with a burner phone, urging him to call if he needed anything. She had promised to continue digging, but Darius was not one to wait around for answers. He had learned long ago that action was the best defense. Darius's first stop was a public library, its sterile interior a far cry from the chaos of prison. He found a quiet corner and booted up one of the computers. His fingers flew over the keyboard as he searched for everything he could about Preston Langford. It did not take long to uncover the basics. Langford was a high-level real estate developer, his name attached to several lucrative projects across the city. On the surface, he looked clean, a philanthropist, a family man, but Darius knew better. Digging deeper, he found whispers of controversy buried in obscure articles and blogs, land disputes, shady deals, allegations of intimidation tactics, all things that had never made it to the mainstream media. Langford had a way of keeping his hands clean, using others to do his dirty work while maintaining the appearance of legitimacy. Darius's eyes narrowed as he jotted down addresses and names tied to Langford's projects. One name stood out. Haven Enterprises, a shell company listed on several contracts. It was vague enough to avoid attention, but Darius recognized it for what it was, a front. He printed out what he needed, tucking the papers into his jacket before leaving. As he stepped outside, the cool air hit him like a wake-up call. He pulled the burner phone from his pocket and dialed Elena's number. "Darius," she answered quickly, her voice sharp and alert. "Everything okay?" "I found a lead," he said, keeping his tone low as he scanned the street. "Langford tied to a company called Haven Enterprises. I need you to look into it. Find out who is running it, who they have been paying." Elena paused for a moment before responding. "I will dig into it, but Darius, be careful. Langford is powerful. If you start poking around, he is going to know." Darius smirked faintly. "Let him. He has been coming for me this whole time. It is about time I return the favor." Elena sighed. "Just do not do anything reckless. I will call you as soon as I have something." Darius hung up, slipping the phone back into his pocket. He had no intention of waiting for answers. If Haven Enterprises was Langford's operation, there would be people who knew the truth, people who could be persuaded to talk. By nightfall, Darius found himself in front of a small, unassuming office building in an industrial part of town. The sign on the door read, Haven Enterprises, the letters peeling slightly at the edges. It did not look like much, but that only confirmed what Darius already suspected. This was not a real business. It was a hub for whatever Langford was hiding. He slipped inside. The faint hum of fluorescent lights and the smell of stale coffee filled the air. The front desk was empty, and the building was eerily quiet. Darius moved cautiously, his eyes scanning every corner as he made his way down the hall. Most of the doors were locked, but one near the end of the corridor was slightly ajar. Inside, he found a small office cluttered with paperwork and a single computer. Darius scanned the room quickly, his gaze landing on a filing cabinet in the corner. He pulled it open, rifling through the folders until he found what he was looking for: contracts, payment records, and a list of names. Langford's web was bigger than he had imagined, spanning multiple cities and involving more than just the prison hit. There were bribes, kickbacks, and connections to local officials. Darius's stomach tightened as he read the names. This was not just about him. Langford was running a full-scale operation, using intimidation and force to silence anyone who stood in his way. And Darius had been one of those people. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, pulling Darius from his thoughts. He froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the shiv he had kept hidden since prison. The sound grew louder, closer. He slipped behind the desk, crouching low as the door creaked open. A man entered, his movements cautious, a phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah, I am at the office now," he said. "No, everything is quiet. Langford is just being paranoid." Darius stepped out of the shadows, his voice cold and sharp. "Is he?" The man froze, his eyes widening as he turned to face Darius. "Who the hell are you?" "The guy Langford tried to bury," Darius said, taking a step forward, his gaze unwavering. "Now you're going to tell me everything you know, or we are going to have a problem." The tension in the small office was palpable as Darius stepped closer, his imposing presence filling the room. The man looked younger than Darius had expected, his nervous energy radiating through every tense muscle in his body. His phone slipped from his hand, clattering to the desk, and his wide eyes darted to the door as if considering an escape. "Do not even think about it," Darius said, his voice low and sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. He stood just feet away, his posture relaxed but ready, the aura of someone who had survived worse than whatever came next. "You are not getting past me." The man swallowed hard, his hands raising slightly in a gesture of surrender. "Look, I do not know who you are, but I am just an assistant. I do not know anything." Darius's lips twitched into a faint, humorless smile. "An assistant who is here at night talking to Langford about how paranoid he is getting? Do not insult my intelligence." He leaned forward, resting his hands on the desk, forcing the man to meet his gaze. "Here is how this works. You tell me what I want to know, and you get to walk out of here in one piece. You lie to me, and things get messy. Understand?" The man nodded quickly, sweat beading on his forehead. Okay, what do you want to know?" "Start with your name," Darius said, his tone calm but laced with authority. "Nathan," the man stammered. "Nathan Langford." Darius's eyebrow arched. "Langford. Any relation to Preston?" Nathan hesitated, then nodded. "He is my uncle. I do some work for him. Nothing illegal, I swear. Just paperwork, errands." "Save it," Darius interrupted. "Your uncle framed me, put me in prison, and hired people to kill me. I do not care what your job description is. What I care about is what you know." Nathan's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, panic flashing across his face. I do not know much. He does not tell me everything." Darius's fist slammed onto the desk, rattling the papers and making Nathan jump. "Then tell me what you do know." Nathan recoiled, his hands trembling. Okay. He has been using Haven Enterprises to launder money and funnel bribes. He has got people in the city council, law enforcement, even the courts. Anyone who gets in his way either gets bought off or disappears. Darius's jaw tightened. "And what about me? Why did he target me?" Nathan hesitated, his eyes darting to the door again. Darius straightened, stepping closer, his presence looming. "Do not make me ask twice, Nathan." Nathan let out a shaky breath. "You were part of a deal that went bad. Langford wanted to acquire some land for one of his developments, but the owners would not sell. You advised them, did not you? Told them how to protect their rights." Darius's chest tightened. He remembered the case, a small community that Langford had tried to muscle out of their homes under the guise of urban development. Darius had worked with them pro bono to block the deal. It had not been easy, but they had won, or so he had thought. "That is why he came after me," Darius muttered, the pieces clicking into place. "I cost him millions." Nathan nodded quickly. "He could not risk you coming after him again. Said you were too good at digging up dirt, making waves, so he found a way to take you out of the picture." "And the evidence he used to frame me," Darius pressed. Nathan swallowed hard. "He has got connections, dirty cops, shady lawyers. They planted the drugs in your car, set you up for distribution. It was airtight." Darius's fists clenched at his sides, his fury barely contained. "And the Iron Fangs. Was that part of his plan too?" Nathan nodded, his voice trembling. "Yeah. After you got locked up, he figured you would find a way to survive. Said you were too stubborn to die on your own. So he paid Vance and his crew to finish the job. Said it had to look like prison violence. Nothing that could be traced back to him." Darius exhaled slowly, his mind racing. Langford had orchestrated everything, pulling strings from the shadows to destroy his life. But now Darius had the name, the motive, and the method. Langford's carefully constructed web was starting to unravel. Nathan's voice broke through his thoughts. "Please, man. I told you everything I know. Just let me go." Darius stared at him for a long moment, weighing his options. Nathan was a pawn, but pawns could still be dangerous. Finally, he nodded. "Fine. But if you warn Langford, if you try to run, I will find you. And next time, we will not be talking." Nathan nodded frantically, stumbling toward the door. "You will not hear from me. I swear." As the door slammed shut behind him, Darius sat back in the chair, his hands gripping the armrest tightly. Langford had built his empire on lies, intimidation, and corruption. But now Darius had what he needed to tear it all down. Tomorrow, the hunt would begin in earnest. Langford would not see it coming. Darius sat in the quiet apartment, his mind racing as he laid out the papers he had taken from Haven Enterprises alongside the notes he had written. Each name, each connection, and every whispered lead painted a vivid picture of the corruption Preston Langford had built his empire on. The anger simmering inside Darius was tempered only by his laser-sharp focus. He was not just going after Langford. He was going to dismantle everything the man had built. The burner phone buzzed on the table, snapping Darius out of his thoughts. He grabbed it quickly, seeing Elena's name flash on the screen. "Darius," he said, answering immediately. "Darius, I found more on Haven Enterprises," Elena said, her voice tense but steady. "It is worse than we thought. Langford has been using it to hide everything. Bribes to city officials, kickbacks to contractors, even payouts to gangs like the Iron Fangs. He has got layers of people protecting him." Darius leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening. "I figured as much. He has been operating like this for years, has not he?" "Years, is he?" Elena confirmed. "But here is the thing. He has gotten sloppy. Some of the payments have not been fully laundered, and I found a few that trace back to his personal accounts. If we can connect those payments to the people he has hired, we can start building a case." Darius nodded, his mind already forming a plan. "We will need more than just payment trails. Langford has got people in law enforcement, maybe even the courts. If we take this to the wrong person, it will disappear before it ever sees the light of day." "I know," Elena said. "That is why I have been reaching out to a few trusted people I have worked with before. If we can get enough hard evidence, we can bypass Langford's network entirely. But it is going to take time." "Time is not something we have," Darius replied. "Langford knows I am out, and he is going to come after me. If we wait too long, he will bury everything before we can touch him." Elena hesitated, then sighed. "You are right, but we have to be smart about this. If you go charging in without a solid plan, he will find a way to spin it. You need something undeniable." Darius's eyes fell on the pile of papers in front of him, his gaze narrowing. "I will get it. Langford's dirty money is not just sitting in accounts. It is tied to people, places. If I can find one of those people and make them talk, we will have what we need." Elena's voice dropped to a serious tone. "You are talking about direct confrontation, Darius. That is dangerous. Langford is not just going to let someone close to him spill his secrets." "I am not waiting for permission," Darius said firmly. "Langford sent people to kill me. I am not giving him the chance to do it again." Elena exhaled slowly. "Just promise me you will be careful. I have already started compiling everything I found so far. I will send it to you once it is ready. But Darius, you are walking into a hornet's nest. You need to be sure you are ready." "I have never been more ready," Darius said, his voice cold and certain. "This is not just about me, Elena. Langford has hurt a lot of people, and it is time he paid for it." Darius spent the rest of the night mapping out his plan. The records he had taken from Haven Enterprises included several names, contractors, middlemen, and low-level enforcers who had been on Langford's payroll. One name stood out: Wade Ramsey, a contractor who had been paid significant sums for security services. It did not take much to guess what that really meant. Wade's address was listed on the paperwork, a warehouse on the outskirts of the city that doubled as his base of operations. Darius recognized the type, a place where deals were made in the shadows, far from prying eyes. He packed a small bag, ensuring he had everything he needed. The shiv from prison was still tucked into his jacket, a grim reminder of how far he was willing to go. As he zipped up the bag, his mind drifted to the fight ahead. Wade was not likely to talk willingly, but Darius had faced worse odds before. The warehouse was a hulking, shadowed structure surrounded by empty lots and chain-link fences. Darius parked his car a block away, moving quietly through the darkness as he approached. The faint sound of voices and the glow of a single light spilling out from the warehouse door told him he was in the right place. He slipped through a side entrance, his movement silent and calculated. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of oil and stale cigarettes. Wade was easy to spot, a broad, rough-looking man standing near a table piled with cash and ledgers. Two other men flanked him, both armed. Their laughter echoed through the cavernous space. Darius moved closer, staying in the shadows, his pulse steady. This was not a brawl in prison or a desperate fight for survival. This was something else, a calculated strike. He stepped into the light, his voice sharp and commanding. "Wade Ramsey." The room went silent as the three men turned toward him. Wade's eyes narrowed, his hand drifting toward the gun on his hip. "Who the hell are you?" "The man who is about to make your life very difficult," Darius said, his voice cold as steel. "Sit down, Wade. We need to talk." The room was heavy with tension as Darius stepped closer, his imposing figure framed by the dim, flickering overhead light. Wade Ramsey stiffened, his hand hovering near the gun on his hip. The two men flanking him shifted uneasily, their eyes darting between Darius and their boss. "I do not know who you think you are," Wade said, his voice gruff, but the slight tremor in his hand betrayed his confidence. "But you have got about 10 seconds to turn around and walk out of here before this gets messy." Darius did not flinch. His gaze locked on Wade. "Messy is exactly what I am looking for. If you do not sit down and start talking." One of the armed men stepped forward, his hand gripping the butt of his pistol. "You got a death wish, pal?" In a blur of movement, Darius grabbed the nearest wrench from the workbench beside him and hurled it with precision. The heavy metal struck the man's hand, knocking the gun to the floor. Darius followed up with a swift kick to the man's stomach, sending him sprawling into the corner. The second man hesitated, his grip tightening on his weapon, but Darius was already on him. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it sharply until the gun clattered to the ground. A sharp elbow to the temple left him crumpled on the floor next to his companion. Wade did not move. His eyes widened as Darius turned his full attention to him. "Your guys are down. You are next if you do not sit your ass in that chair." For a moment, Wade looked like he might resist. But the look in Darius's eyes, cold, unrelenting, made him think twice. He slowly lowered himself into the chair by the table, his hands raised in mock surrender. "You have got guts. I will give you that," Wade said, trying to mask his fear with a smirk. "But you are playing a dangerous game." Darius pulled one of the fallen guns from the floor, ejecting the clip and tossing it aside. He leaned against the table, towering over Wade. "The only game I am playing is the one where I get answers. You are on Langford's payroll. You have been running security for his operations, cleaning up his messes. Start talking." Wade snorted, crossing his arms. "You think I'm going to rat on Langford? Do you have any idea who you are dealing with? He will bury you." Darius grabbed the back of Wade's chair, dragging it forward with a screech that echoed through the warehouse. He leaned in, his face inches from Wade's. "You are worried about Langford? You should be worried about me. I have got nothing to lose, Wade, and I do not have time for games." Wade's bravado faltered, his smirk slipping. "I do not know what you are talking about." Darius slammed his fist on the table, the sound reverberating through the space. "Do not lie to me. I know you have been handling his dirty work. You have got two choices. Talk now, or I will make sure Langford knows you have been spilling his secrets. How long do you think you will last when he thinks you have flipped?" The color drained from Wade's face, his resolve crumbling under Darius's relentless glare. All right, fine. What do you want to know?" Darius straightened, his expression hard. "Start with why Langford wanted me out of the picture. Why go through the trouble of framing me and hiring a gang to finish the job?" Wade hesitated, his hands gripping the arms of the chair. "You cost him a fortune, man. That community you helped block his development, that was just the beginning. He was planning to expand, turn that whole area into some billion-dollar project, but you derailed it, and the investors backed out. You embarrassed him." "And the frame job," Darius pressed. Wade nodded. "He needed you out of the way, could not risk you doing it again. He had the connections, cops, lawyers, judges. It was easy for him to set you up, and once you were inside, he figured you would be easy to handle. That is where I came in." Darius's jaw tightened. "The Iron Fangs. You coordinated that." Wade swallowed hard. "I handled the payments. Langford told me to keep it clean, make it look like typical prison violence. Vance and his crew were eager to take the money. They did not ask questions." Darius's fists clenched at his sides, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. "And now, what is Langford planning next?" Wade hesitated, glancing toward the door as if expecting someone to burst in. "He is paranoid now that you are out. He has been shifting money, erasing records, covering his tracks. He has got some big meeting coming up, something about a new deal to secure his position. I do not know the details, but if you want to catch him, that is where you will find him." Darius leaned back, his mind racing. "Where is the meeting?" Wade's voice dropped to a whisper. "An office building downtown, top floor. It is one of his properties." "But you did not hear that from me." Darius stepped back, his expression cold. You are right. I did not. Wade sagged in the chair, relief washing over him as Darius turned toward the door, but Darius stopped, glancing over his shoulder. If I hear you have warned Langford, I will be back, and next time we will not be talking. Wade nodded quickly, his face pale. You will not hear a word from me. Darius walked out of the warehouse, his step steady and his purpose clear. He had the location, the details, and the momentum. Preston Langford's carefully constructed empire was about to crumble. The city's skyline glimmered in the night, its towering buildings casting long shadows over the streets below. Darius sat in the darkened apartment, the faint glow of the burner phone screen illuminating his face as he reviewed the intel Elena had sent him. The details from Wade matched what she had uncovered. Preston Langford was hosting a high-stakes meeting in one of his office buildings downtown. It was a final move to secure his position, to lock down his network of bribes and deals before Darius could bring it all crashing down. Darius set the phone down, his mind racing. This was not just another step. It was the moment. If he played this right, Langford would not just be exposed. He would be ruined. But Langford was not an idiot. The man would have protection, layers of it. Darius would have to be ready for anything. Elena arrived just before midnight, her expression as grim and focused as his. She placed a laptop on the table and sat across from him, her tone brisk. I have got everything we need. Langford has been using that building as a hub for his operations for years. The top floor is essentially his private domain. Guards, secure servers, the works. Darius nodded, scanning the schematics she had pulled up on the screen. What is the security like? Standard corporate during the day, but at night it ramps up, she explained. Private security firm, ex-military types. Langford does not trust just anyone. There is no walking in the front door unnoticed. Darius's lips pressed into a thin line. Then I will have to find another way in. Elena frowned, her concern evident. Darius, this is not like dealing with Vance or his gang. These people are professionals. If they catch you, it will not end well. Darius leaned back, his gaze steady. I do not have a choice, Elena. If I do not get to Langford tonight, he will bury everything. The money, the connections. It will all disappear, and I will be back to square one. Elena sighed, rubbing her temples. All right, if you are going to do this, let us at least make sure you have the advantage. She pointed to the schematics. The building has a service entrance on the east side, usually used for late-night deliveries. It is lightly guarded, but it will still get you inside. Darius studied the map, his mind piecing together the plan. Once I am in, the elevator to the top floor requires a key card. Elena continued. Wade said Langford will be in his private conference room. That means you will need to either take out one of his guards or find another way up. The stairwells are an option, but they are monitored by cameras. Darius smirked faintly. Cameras cannot stop me. Elena shot him a look, half amused, half exasperated. They can alert the guards, so be careful. Over the next hour, they finalized the plan. Elena provided him with everything she could, details on guard rotations, camera placements, and even a list of Langford's known associates who might be present. As they worked, Darius's determination only grew. This was not just about clearing his name anymore. It was about justice, for himself and everyone Langford had trampled in his pursuit of power. Finally, Elena leaned back, her expression softening. Darius, you do not have to do this alone. I can call in some favors, get more people involved. Darius shook his head. The more people know, the more chances Langford has to find out. This needs to be clean, quiet. Elena hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Just promise me you will be careful. Langford is not going to go down without a fight. Darius's smirk returned, this time with a hint of dark humor. Good, neither am I. Before he left, Darius took a moment to prepare. He packed lightly, a black duffel bag with a few essentials, gloves, a small flashlight, and the shiv he had carried since prison. It was not much, but Darius knew how to make the most of limited resources. He slipped into dark, nondescript clothing and checked his reflection in the mirror. The man staring back at him looked older, harder, but there was no mistaking the fire in his eyes. This was the man Langford had tried to break, the man who refused to stay down. Elena walked him to the door, her hand resting briefly on his arm. I will be monitoring everything I can from here. If something goes wrong, call me. I mean it, Darius. He nodded, his expression softening for just a moment. Thanks, Elena, for everything. She gave him a faint smile, but worry lingered in her eyes as he stepped into the night. The streets were quiet as Darius approached the building, sticking to the shadows. The office tower loomed above him, its sleek glass exterior reflecting the city lights. To anyone else, it was just another corporate hub, but Darius knew better. This was the heart of Langford's empire, a symbol of the man's power and corruption. Darius circled to the east side, his steps silent as he approached the service entrance. As Elena had predicted, there was only one guard stationed outside. His posture relaxed. Darius moved swiftly, his training taking over. Before the man could react, Darius had him in a chokehold, easing him to the ground without a sound. He grabbed the man's keycard and slipped inside. The interior was dimly lit, the hum of the building systems filling the silence. Darius's movements were precise, his focus unwavering as he made his way toward the elevator. The real challenge was just beginning. The elevator doors slid open with a muted chime, revealing the opulent design of the top floor. The space exuded wealth and power. Polished marble floors, modern art on the walls, and a panoramic view of the city glowing in the night beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. But to Darius, it was all a facade, masking the rot beneath. This was the heart of Preston Langford's empire, and tonight it would begin to crumble. Darius stepped out cautiously, the keycard he had swiped from the guard still in his hand. He slipped it into his pocket, his sharp eyes scanning the hallway ahead. The silence was unnerving, but he knew better than to trust it. Langford would not leave this space unprotected, especially not tonight. As Darius crept down the hall, he counted the doors, matching them to the floor plan Elena had shown him. The conference room was at the far end, behind a pair of heavy double doors. Between him and his target, however, were two guards, both standing near the entrance to the room. They were tall, broad-shouldered men, their stances alert and their weapons visible beneath their jackets. Darius crouched behind a decorative planter, taking a moment to observe their movements. They were not casual. They were scanning the area, occasionally speaking into their earpieces. Langford was not taking any chances tonight. Darius's fingers brushed the handle of the shiv tucked into his jacket, but he hesitated. A direct confrontation would be messy, loud, and would risk alerting Langford. He needed to be smarter than that. His eyes flicked to a nearby emergency panel on the wall. An idea forming, he moved silently, sticking to the shadows until he reached the panel. With careful precision, he pried it open and found what he was looking for: a fire alarm control. It was not the kind that would trigger a full evacuation, but it would create enough of a distraction to pull the guards away from their post. Darius pressed a button, and a sharp beeping noise filled the air. The guards immediately tensed, their hands moving to their weapons as they exchanged glances. "Go check it out," one of them barked, nodding to his partner. The second guard moved toward the source of the sound, leaving his companion alone at the doors. Darius seized the moment. He moved swiftly, closing the distance to the remaining guard in seconds. He struck with precision, a sharp jab to the man's neck followed by a quick sweep of his legs. The guard crumpled to the floor, stunned but still conscious. Before he could recover, Darius clamped a hand over his mouth and pressed the shiv to his throat. "Do not make a sound," Darius hissed, his voice cold and steady. "I am not here for you. Where is Langford?" The guard's eyes darted nervously to the double doors. "In there," Darius pressed, applying just enough pressure to make his point. The guard nodded frantically. Darius leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "How many are inside?" "3," the guard muttered. "Langford and 2 more guards. That is it. I swear." Darius's gaze hardened as he studied the man's face, searching for any sign of deceit. Satisfied, he pulled the guard's radio from his belt and smashed it against the floor before shoving him against the wall. "Stay here. Move and you will regret it." The guard nodded quickly, his fear keeping him frozen in place. Darius turned his attention to the doors, his hand tightening around the shiv. The adrenaline coursing through his veins sharpened his focus, every sense heightened. He pressed his ear to the door, straining to catch the muffled voices on the other side. Langford was speaking, his tone clipped and authoritative, but Darius could not make out the words. He took a deep breath, steeling himself. This was it, the moment he had been working toward since the day he was framed. Everything hinged on what happened next. Darius pushed the doors open just enough to slip inside. The conference room came into view. It was as opulent as the rest of the floor, with a long mahogany table dominating the space and sleek monitors lining the walls. Langford sat at the head of the table, his suit impeccable and his expression calm. He did not even look up as Darius entered, as if he were completely unaware of the intrusion. The two guards flanking him, however, reacted immediately, their hands flying to their weapons. "Do not," Darius said sharply, his voice cutting through the room like a knife. He held the shiv in one hand and the guard's pistol, which he had taken earlier, in the other. The barrel was pointed directly at Langford. "Unless you want your boss to take the first hit." Langford's head lifted slowly, his gaze meeting Darius's with a calm, almost amused expression. "Mr. Holt," he said, his voice smooth and unbothered, "I was wondering when you would show up." Darius stepped further into the room, his every movement calculated. "I have had enough of your games, Langford. This ends tonight." Langford leaned back in his chair, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "Does it? Because from where I am sitting, you look like a desperate man with nothing to lose." Darius's grip tightened on the pistol. "You are right about one thing. I have got nothing to lose, but you have got everything, and I am about to take it all away." The guards hesitated, their hands hovering near their weapons as they glanced at Langford for direction. "Stand down," Langford said coolly, waving a hand. "Let us hear what Mr. Holt has to say. After all, he has gone through so much trouble to get here." Darius's eyes burned with determination as he stepped closer, his focus unwavering. "Start talking, Langford. Tell me everything, or I will tear this whole operation apart piece by piece." Darius's hand tightened on the pistol, the weight of the moment pressing down on him as he stared at Preston Langford. The man leaned back in his chair, his face an unreadable mask of cold confidence, but his eyes flickered with unease. "You have made a mistake, Holt," Langford said, his voice laced with derision. "You think barging in here changes anything? I have built this empire to withstand people like you." Darius took a slow step closer, the recording device in his pocket already running. "You did not build anything, Langford. You stole it. You framed me, hired gangs to kill me, and bribed your way out of every crime you have committed. The only thing you have built is a house of cards, and it is about to fall." Langford smirked, but there was a slight twitch in his jaw. "And what exactly do you think you are going to do about it? Even if what you are saying were true, who is going to believe you? You are an ex-con. No one cares what you think." Darius leaned in, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You are going to care when this is all over, but I am not leaving here without hearing it from you." Langford scoffed, crossing his arms. "Hear what, exactly? Your conspiracy theories. Save it, Holt. This little act of yours is pathetic." Darius grabbed the chair Langford was seated in and yanked it forward, the sudden motion making Langford flinch. "No more games," Darius barked. "You framed me, Langford. You planted evidence, paid off judges, and hired gangs to kill me in prison. Admit it." For a moment, Langford's mask of confidence cracked, but he quickly replaced it with a sneer. "I do not know what you are talking about." Darius slammed his hand down on the table. The sharp crack reverberated through the room. "Do not lie to me. I have got Wade Ramsey's testimony. He told me about the payments to the Iron Fangs, about the bribes, about everything. You think you can keep this buried? Think again." Langford's lips pressed into a thin line, but his silence spoke volumes. Darius took a deep breath, reining in his rage. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the recording device, placing it on the table. The red light blinked steadily, its presence a silent witness to everything that had been said. "What is that supposed to prove?" Langford asked, his voice wavering slightly. Darius's smirk was humorless. "It is proof that you are done. Every word you have said since I walked in is on record. And once you admit the truth, there will not be a single doubt about what you have done." Langford's gaze darted to the guards, his calm facade slipping further. "You are bluffing. You do not have anything." Darius leaned closer, his voice sharp and cutting. "You really want to test me? Fine. Let us talk about Haven Enterprises, about the bribes tied directly to your accounts, about the evidence Wade handed over, emails, payment logs, even photos of you meeting with gang leaders. You think you are untouchable, but I have got enough to put you away. And if you do not admit it now, I will make sure every one of your associates knows you turned on them first." Langford's face paled, the weight of Darius's words sinking in. His hands curled into fists, his breathing uneven. "You do not understand," he said finally, his voice a low growl. "I did what I had to do. You were a threat to everything I have built." Darius's eyes narrowed. "So you admit it. You framed me. You planted the drugs and paid off everyone to make sure I went down for it." Langford hesitated, but the pressure was too much. "Yeah," he snapped, his voice rising. "I did it all right. You cost me millions with your damn advice to those people, and I could not afford for you to get in my way again. So I made sure you were out of the picture." The room fell silent, the weight of his confession hanging heavy in the air. Darius's expression did not change, but inside he felt the first stirrings of vindication. "And the Iron Fangs? You paid them to kill me in prison." Langford glared at him, his defiance flickering. "You do not get it, do you? This is not personal. It is business. You were a loose end and I tied it up." Darius exhaled slowly, his hand steady as he gestured to the recording device. "Thank you for confirming that." Langford's eyes widened as the realization hit him. "You!" The double doors burst open and Elena entered, flanked by Detective Riley and a team of officers. "Preston Langford," Riley announced, his voice firm as he held up a warrant. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, bribery, attempted murder, and other charges. Everything you just said is on record, and we have got enough evidence to take down your entire operation." Langford shot to his feet, but the guards were already stepping back, raising their hands in surrender. "You cannot do this," he shouted, his voice panicked. "I built this city. You do not know what you are doing." Darius stepped aside as Riley approached, his expression calm. "No, Langford, you do not know what you have done, but you are about to find out." As Langford was cuffed and led away, he continued to yell, his threats falling on deaf ears. Darius turned to Elena, the faintest hint of relief softening his features. "It is over," he said quietly. Elena nodded, her voice steady. "For now. But you have done it, Darius. You have cleared your name." Darius exhaled deeply, the tension finally easing from his shoulders. Now it is time to make sure this never happens again. The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension as Preston Langford sat at the defense table, his once impeccable suit slightly rumpled, the weight of his trial etched into every line of his face. The media had descended on the case, reporters crowding the gallery, their cameras banned, but their pens flying furiously across notepads. Langford's empire, once a symbol of unshakable power, had become a spectacle of public disgrace. Darius sat a few rows back, his expression calm but watchful. He had no reason to be here. His testimony had been given weeks ago, and Elena had assured him that the evidence they had provided was damning enough to secure a conviction. Still, he could not stay away. He needed to see it through, to hear the words that would officially close this chapter of his life. At the front of the courtroom, the prosecutor stood, her voice confident and sharp as she delivered her final argument. Preston Langford believed he was untouchable. He used his wealth, his influence, and his connections to manipulate the system, to ruin lives, and to silence anyone who got in his way. But today we have proven that no one is above the law. The evidence is clear, the testimonies are undeniable, and justice demands a verdict of guilty. The defense attorney rose, his face pale but composed, as he began his rebuttal. Langford's team had fought hard, throwing every technicality and loophole they could find at the prosecution. But even the most skilled legal maneuvering could not erase the mountain of evidence stacked against them. The recordings, the payment logs, the testimony from Langford's own associates. It was all there, laid bare for the jury to see. Darius's gaze drifted to Langford, who sat stiffly, his hands clasped tightly together. The man's defiance had waned over the weeks of the trial, replaced by a quiet, simmering rage. Darius could almost feel it from where he sat, but he did not care. Langford had underestimated him, and now he was paying the price. The jury returned after only a short deliberation, their verdict swift and unanimous. As the foreperson stood, the tension in the room was palpable. On the charges of conspiracy, bribery, and attempted murder, the foreperson announced, her voice clear and steady, "We find the defendant Preston Langford guilty." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom, followed by the hushed murmurs of spectators and reporters. Langford's shoulders slumped, the reality of his downfall crashing down on him like a tidal wave. His attorney leaned over, whispering furiously, but Langford did not respond. He stared straight ahead, his expression a mask of shock and defeat. The judge's gavel struck the bench, silencing the room. "Sentencing will be determined at a later date," she said firmly. "For now, the defendant will remain in custody. Court is adjourned." As the courtroom began to empty, Darius remained seated, his eyes fixed on Langford as the bailiffs led him away in handcuffs. Their gazes met briefly, and for a moment Darius saw the hatred burning in Langford's eyes. But it did not matter. The man was finished, his empire in ruins, his power stripped away. Elena appeared at Darius's side, her expression a mix of relief and satisfaction. "It is done," she said quietly. "He is going away for a long time." Darius nodded, his voice calm. "It is not just about him. It is about everyone he hurt. The people who lost their homes, who were threatened or silenced, they deserve justice too." Elena placed a hand on his shoulder, her grip firm. "And they got it. Because of you." Darius turned to her, his gaze steady. "Because of us. I could not have done this alone." She smiled faintly, but there was a seriousness in her tone. "So, what now? You have cleared your name. Langford is out of the picture. What is next?" Darius hesitated, his mind drifting to the scars left by the ordeal. The fight had consumed him for so long, but now, for the first time in years, he felt free. "I do not know," he admitted, "but I am going to figure it out." Elena nodded. "Whatever you decide, you know where to find me." Darius smiled faintly, the first genuine smile he had felt in a long time. "Thanks, Elena, for everything." As he stepped out of the courthouse, the sunlight hit him like a wave, warm and bright. The city stretched out before him, bustling with life, oblivious to the battle that had just been fought within its walls. Darius took a deep breath, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in months. This was not the end of the journey. It was a new beginning. The scars of what he had endured would never fully fade, but they would serve as a reminder of what he had fought for, of what he had won. Preston Langford's empire was gone, and with it the shadow that had loomed over Darius's life. Justice had been served, and now it was time to rebuild. Darius sat on the worn bench at the edge of the park, the sounds of the city buzzing faintly in the distance. The cool evening breeze brushed against his face, carrying with it the faint scent of freshly cut grass. He had not been here in years, not since before his life had been torn apart. It felt surreal to sit in the open air without bars or walls closing in around him, free to breathe and think without fear. He let out a long, steady breath, leaning back against the bench as his gaze drifted to the horizon. The trial was over, Langford was behind bars, and the weight that had pressed down on him for so long had finally lifted. For the first time in years, the fight was over, but the scars of the battle lingered. Darius's mind often wandered back to the prison, to the dark, suffocating halls, and the constant tension that came with knowing he was a marked man. The Iron Fangs, Vance. The nights spent wondering if he would survive to see the morning. It all played in his mind like a reel he could not turn off. He clenched his fists unconsciously, the phantom sensation of the shivs still lingering in his grip. There had been moments in that place when he thought he might lose himself, when the fear and the anger threatened to overwhelm him, but somehow he had held on. Somehow he had found the strength to keep fighting, to survive. Survive, he muttered to himself, the word hanging in the air. It was not enough just to survive. He had learned that the hard way. Survival without purpose, without hope, was not living. It was just existing. And for a long time, that was all he had been doing. Existing, waiting for a chance to clear his name, to reclaim the life that had been stolen from him. Now that chance had come. Langford's empire was gone, his network of corruption dismantled. The guards who turned a blind eye, the lawyers who twisted the truth, the judges who sold their verdicts. All of them were being investigated. Their connections to Langford laid bare. And the Iron Fangs, the gang had been broken. Their leadership scattered in the aftermath of Vance's downfall. Justice had been served, not just for Darius, but for every person Langford had hurt. Every life he had tried to destroy in the name of greed. Darius's thoughts turned to the prison again, to the faces of the men he had fought, and the few he had reluctantly trusted. He thought of Brody, the guard who had given him hope when he thought he had none. He wondered if Brody had heard about what had happened, if he would ever know the role he had played in helping Darius survive. He thought of the nights spent lying awake, listening to the taunts and threats echoing from the cells around him. He had been terrified, but he had not let it break him. He had fought back, not just against the men who came for him, but against the fear itself. And in doing so, he had found a part of himself he thought he had lost, the part that refused to give up, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. A soft voice broke his reverie. "Darius." He turned to see Elena standing a few feet away, her expression soft but serious. She held 2 coffee cups, one of which she extended toward him. "Thought you might need this." Darius accepted the cup with a faint smile. "Thanks." She sat down beside him, her gaze following his toward the horizon. For a moment they sat in silence, the weight of everything they had been through hanging between them. "It is strange," Darius said finally, his voice quiet. "I spent so long fighting to get here, to prove the truth, to clear my name, and now that it is over, I do not know what to do next." Elena took a sip of her coffee before replying, "That is normal. You have been in survival mode for years, Darius. It is going to take time to adjust, to figure out what comes next, but you have earned that time. You have earned the chance to live." Darius nodded slowly, her words sinking in. "I want to help," he said after a moment. "The men in prison, some of them deserve to be there, but a lot of them, they were just like me, caught in a system that is designed to chew them up and spit them out. Maybe I can do something about that." Elena smiled faintly. "You would be good at that. You have seen the system from the inside. You know how broken it is." Darius exhaled, the beginnings of a plan forming in his mind. "Yeah, and maybe for the first time I can stop surviving and start building something, for myself and for others." Elena placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him. "You have got a long road ahead, but if anyone can do it, it is you." Darius met her gaze, the faintest hint of a smile playing on his lips. "I could not have done any of this without you, Elena. Thank you." She shook her head. "You did not need me, Darius. You just needed someone to remind you of who you are." Darius turned back to the horizon, his chest rising and falling with a deep, steady breath. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. The scars of his ordeal would never fade completely, but they were no longer a burden. They were a reminder of what he had overcome, of the strength he had found in himself. He was not just free. He was alive, and for the first time, he was ready to live. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.